Okay, before we start, can I please remind members to switch their mobile phones off and also doctor your computers so that every news flash that comes in doesn't ping, if you would, please. I won't ask for somebody to own up, but that serves as a reminder as to why we like them to be off. Good morning and welcome we'll start with our prayer. I'm getting ahead of myself. Dear Lord, keep our minds open to fresh ideas. May we continue to move forward as one community, cheerfully embracing bold decisions and leaving behind us nothing but our fear of the unknown. Life changes, and so must we. Amen. Right. Welcome to this meeting of the Council. For the benefit of those that are vulnerable or otherwise anxious about becoming ill, we ask that you continue to respect the decision for those who wish to still wear a face mask. It's especially important to those listening remotely that you mute any devices. We've been through that. And you may find it easier to be seated while using your microphone. If you're wearing a mask, please remove it while you are speaking. Please do not hold the microphone by the stem. They are very expensive to repair, apparently. I propose to take a break of approximately 20 minutes at 12:30, depending on where we are on the item on the agenda. And that will allow you time to have a coffee, cup of tea, have something to eat, and take a comfort break. So we'll move into item 1, which is apologies. Chief Executive will read apologies for absence. Must have held it by the stem. Okay, we'll share.
Thank you. Apologies have been received from the following councillors: Ted Clark, Gerald Dakin, Rob Gittings, John Price, David Minery, Robert Tyndall, Kevin Turley, Mark Williams. Thank you.
Thank you. Don't hold it by the stem. Right. Disclosable pecuniary interests. I'd like to remind members to disclose any pecuniary and other registrable or non-registrable interests in any matter to be discussed, including an interest in their register of interests, and leave the chamber prior to that matter being discussed. Yes. Thank you. Looking around the room, Councillor Bentinck.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd just like to declare the member of the Christmas party. This is a non-political group who devoted to celebrating a historic event in the Middle East 2,000 years ago. Just like to thank Father Christmas, his elves and all his offers for all the hard work they've done in the Christmas period with sustainable and eco-friendly transporting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're very welcome. I'm sure they all appreciate that. So, okay. Members, we will crack on so that I know certain members have got carol services and the like this evening. So I move the minutes of the previous council meeting held on the 22nd of September 2022 as circulated with the agenda papers be signed as a correct record.
I second those minutes.
Okay, all those in favour, please show. Any against? More importantly, abstentions if you weren't here. Any of those? Thank you. Item 4 is announcements. To receive such communications as the Chair, Vice Chair and Head of Paid Service may desire to lay before the Council. They have been circulated. And now it's my pleasure also now to welcome Councillor Rachel Connolly, who was elected to the Council in Bridge North West and Tasley Division by-election on the 6th of October 2022. Welcome. I'll refer members to the list of official engagements, as I said a minute ago, that have been sent out and circulated by email. So we'll move on to item 5, which is public questions. In accordance with Procedure Rule 14, we'll now deal with the questions from the members of the public in accordance with the revised procedure rules. The Assistant Director of Legal and Democratic Services will read out the public questions that we've received from members of the public who are not present. The relevant portfolio holder will respond to the questions. I can still hear computers pinging. If we could please silence them, that would be good. Thank you. So the first question is from Mrs. Chris Welch. Tim Collard.
Thank you, Chair. The question is this.
Try the M1. No. It's fine.
Hear me? No,
Be an aerobics session for me today.
Thank you. So the question is this. In January 2021, Shropshire Council debated a motion to support the Climate and Ecological Emergency Bill that is currently being debated in Westminster. The bill calls on the UK government to ensure that the UK contributes fairly to climate mitigation, consistent with limiting global temperature increase to 1.5 centigrade compared to average pre-industrial levels. In July 2022, the Council's Task and Finish group agreed to support the bill, minus the provision on citizens' assemblies. The original bill motion required the Council to inform local media of the decision to support the bill, write to local MPs asking them to support the bill, and write to the CEE Bill Alliance, the organisers of the campaign for the bill, expressing its support. Please could the Council confirm if these steps have been taken, or, if they haven't, outline when they will be. Additionally, will these letters and any responses to them be made publicly available? Can the Council confirm it is still committed to helping the UK meet its climate targets?
Pass the parcel bit and don't hold it by the stem. Okay, there is a response there from Councillor Ian Nellins, who's the Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Climate Change, Environment and Transport. We'll move on to the next question, which is from Jamie Russell, and again, Tim Collard to read.
Thank you, Chair. The question is this. In its climate emergency declaration in 2019, Shropshire Council committed to doing all it could to help the UK meet the 1.5 centigrade target enshrined in the 2015 Paris Agreement and achieve net zero by 2050. In October of this year, the UN Environment Agency said that there was no credible pathway to 1.5 centigrade due to the failure by governments to act on the climate crisis. It stated that only a rapid transformation of our societies would allow us to avoid catastrophic climate breakdown, resulting in millions of deaths. With this in mind, I would like to ask about the North West Relief Road in Shrewsbury. Will the road increase or decrease Shropshire's total emissions over its lifetime? I note that the Council's own data suggests that the road will create around 48,000 tonnes of CO2, construction emissions for a 359 tonne CO2 annual operational saving. How many years will it take for the North West Relief Road to be net zero? Please provide evidence for this. Finally, is the North West Relief Road in line with the UK government's legally binding 2050 net zero target? And if so, how?
Thank you. And again, there is the reply to that from Councillor Ian Nellins, Deputy Leader and Portfolio Holder for Climate Change, Environment and Transport.
Yeah, point of order. We don't have those replies. We haven't heard those replies.
All right. In which case then, I do apologise. I thought we'd sent those out, but in which case I will ask Councillor Nellins to give a response to both, if he would, please. And I will make sure that they are forwarded out to you afterwards as well.
Thank you very much. In answer to Mrs. Chris Welch's question, Shropshire Council debated a motion that called on Council to support the Climate and Ecology Emergency Bill on the 25th of February 2021 and resolved to refer the matter to a task and finish group which met on the 10th of February 2022. The task and finish group broadly supported the aims of the bill but was strongly divided on proposals to set up an independent representative panel of UK citizens. The group did not come to any agreement on how to proceed, so took a vote on a motion to support the bill outright. This was not carried. The group then voted on a motion to support the bill without the clause to set up a citizens panel. This was carried. The Performance Management Scrutiny Committee then agreed to endorse the findings of the Task and Finish Group at its meeting on the 4th of May 2022. Shortly after this, the chair of the Performance Management Scrutiny Committee took the draft letter to Cabinet on the 8th of June 2022. Cabinet agreed that the draft letter should be considered by Council so that Shropshire Council could provide a single response to the bill. The Shropshire Council meeting on the 7th of July 2022 received a report recommending that Shropshire Council writes to the sponsors of the Climate and Ecology Bill to express its broad support for the bill, but to not support the requirement to set up a national citizens panel, reflecting the outcome of discussion to date. This recommendation was agreed, and the agreed response has recently been sent to 0R Shropshire. Thank you for that one. And in answer to Dr. Jimmy Russell's question, the proposal to deliver the North West Relief Road has been carefully reviewed in the light of the Council's stated carbon position. A rigorous modelling and forecasting exercise, both for the construction phase and the future lifetime use of the scheme, has been undertaken and published on the Council's website. Further to this, the methodology and conclusions within the report have been independently reviewed by an academic specialist at Birmingham University. The findings of the report highlight a net carbon legacy for the scheme in the region of 24,000 tonnes over the lifetime of the scheme. This impact has already been considerably mitigated through informed design choices, build materials and methodology, and the acknowledgement of net carbon savings on the highways network more widely within Shrewsbury. The independent North West Relief Road Carbon Report has been publicly available since April 2022. On the second point, in order to reduce the North West Relief Road's carbon legacy still further and potentially to a net zero balance, Shropshire Council is now exploring a range of innovative carbon in and offsetting opportunities within the proximity of the new road and Shropshire more widely. The cost and nature of these measures, along with the final carbon account for the road, will be collated within the full business case. This is expected by autumn 2023 and will be considered for endorsement by all council members in advance of its submittance to the Department for Transport for release the requirement construction's cost in full. And finally, as described in the response in Part B, previous response, Shropshire Council will consider the delivery of the North West Relief Road and its carbon legacy and management holistically as part of its wider activities and carbon accounting approach. As such, Shropshire Council will continue to ensure that its activities are fully aligned with both its local and national carbon guidance and targets as required. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to, is that somebody's computer? If they wouldn't mind turning it down. I'm really getting a bit tired with asking. Thank you. We'll move on to item 6, which is the report of the returning officer, Bridge North West Tasley Division. I'm going to move that we accept, be received and agreed. Seconded by.
I will willingly second that.
Okay. And again, well done. We need to take a vote on that, do we? It's just for noting, so good. Okay, we will move on to item 7, and just a reminder to members that we will need to take a recorded vote in relation to the budget and council tax items under legislation. So I invite Councillor Gwilym Butler, the portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Resources, to present the report and move the report and recommendations be received and agreed. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, this is basically a piece of housekeeping that we have to do on an annual basis to actually understand how many Band D equivalent properties we have within the county, so that we can calculate what our proposed income from the council tax will be in the forthcoming year to help us with the medium-term financial strategy. You will note in 2.3 that there has been an increase of 2.27% over the year, which just mirrors how strong the property market is in the county, with new properties coming on board. There isn't an awful lot to say on the paper. What I would like to point out is that 3.5 in the recommendations talks about second homes. If you listen to Cabinet yesterday, you will see that we are giving notice to people who have second homes, as we have to give at least 12 months notice, that from 24-25, so that's obviously somebody who's got a second home. Shall I try and continue?
Carry on.
Shall I try and effectively, in the midterm financial strategy, we will be putting 100% surcharge on second homes. We will also be monitoring holiday lets as well to ensure that they are available for at least 140 days a year, let for at least 70 days a year. And for those who don't qualify, and if they're getting business rate relief, we will try and get them converted to council tax to get the best value for the council taxpayer. Just thought I'd mention that, Mr. Chairman, as I think it's a very good way forward. I know it's been a green paper to performance management. Nothing more to say. I move the recommendations 3.1 to 3.12 on the paper. Thank you.
That's being seconded, I believe, by...
Yes, happy to second, Chair, and reserve my right.
Councillor Kidd.
Thank you, and I'm really pleased, Gwilym, that you've taken up the cudgels over holiday homes and so on. I did raise this around the budget time last year, as I just lost 10 homes in my division. I am still concerned that we have no planning process whereby when homes are converted into holiday homes, especially into luxury holiday homes, we have no process whereby people, developers actually have to go through that. And it's part of the whole picture of the council tax base. And I would prefer that rural areas didn't lose more and more, especially on the Welsh border, because the Welsh government have cracked down hard on holiday homes and so on. So it's going to move into the Welsh border areas significantly. So alongside what you are now doing, which I welcome, I would love you to then investigate planning restrictions on it so that people have to go through a formal process to convert to help maintain that council tax base. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I've not had any other hands, so Leslie, you reserved your right.
Sorry, nothing more to add, Mr. Chairman.
Gwilym.
Thank you for your response, Heather. And I have a tendency to agree with you, but whether we can legally do that, or whether it falls under national planning policy guidance, I don't know. We can certainly lobby MPs. What I have intimated through the green paper process is, as part of the cost savings, we will probably have to have dedicated officers who actually police these properties. So as part of that process, we can actually try and move everything forward. I think once it's up and running, it would be a really good thing perhaps for scrutiny to have a look at as it progresses. But thank you for your comments. I move the report, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, well, we've got recommendations 3.1 to 3.12. All those in favour, please show.
We have to do a recorded.
Oh, no, we do have to do a recorded vote. That's right. I should follow my instructions for the first time.
Thank you. Roy Aldcroft.
For.
Jeff Anderson. For. Caroline Bagnall. Nicholas Bardsley. Joyce Barrow. Bernie Bentinck,
4.
Thomas Biggins, Edward Bird, Andy Boddington, Peter Broomhall, Julia Buckley, Gary Birchett, Willem Butler, Dean Carroll, Steve Charmley, Rachel Connolly, Rosemary Dartnell, Steve Davenport, Mary Davies, Julian Dean, Jeff Elner, David Evans, Julia Evans, Roger Evans, Paul Gill, Nat Green, Kate Halliday, Simon Harris, Nigel Harting, Nick Hignett, Ruth Houghton, Richard Huffer, Tracy Huffer, Vince Hunt,
4.
Kirsty Hurt Knight, Mike Isherwood, Mark Jones, Simon Jones, Duncan Kerr, Heather Kidd, Christian Lee, Hilary Love, Nigel Lumby, Elliot Lynch, Robert Macy, Richard Marshall, Dan Morris, Pam Mosley, Alan Mosley, Cecilia Motley, Peggy Mullock, Ian Nellings, Kevin Pardy, Viv Parry, Tony Parsons, Leslie Picton, Ed Potter, Chris Schofield, Dan Thomas, Edward Towers, David Vasmer,
4.
Alex Wagner, Claire Wild, Brian Williams, Rob Wilson, Paul Wynne. Thank you.
Good. That was unanimous. Thank you, members. So we'll move on to item 8, which is the Treasury Strategy for 22-23, the mid-year review. So once again, I'm going to invite Councillor Gwilym Butler, the portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Resources, to present the report and move that the report be received and agreed. Gwilym.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, another piece of housekeeping that we have to bring on a regular basis. Not a lot to report that's outside the actual report. However, I think the one comment I would like to make is if we were sitting here this time last year, none of us would have imagined that interest rates would be where they are today. And I think there will be another rise by the Bank of England today. I'd just like to take the opportunity to promote to members the work that the Social Task and Finishes Group is doing about the cost of living crisis. Could you all please point people in the direction of our cost of living website on the Shropshire Council? Because a lot of our constituents will have mortgages and the cost of those mortgages will be going up. So please point them in direction of our cost of living website, and there is a hardship fund there to help with payments, etc. On that note, Chair, I just move the recommendation that members are asked to agree the Treasury strategy updates as set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I second that report and reserve the right of response.
Okay. Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. I welcome the report, and I'm sure we're all pleased to see the increased interest that will be earned on our savings. However, we must also note 10.8 in the report, which makes the obvious point that the increased Bank of England base rate has a knock-on effect, making it more expensive to borrow for capital purposes. So if there are any additional costs to the capital programme, which is put in here, needs to be reviewed and monitored closely, such as, for example, any increase to the cost of the North West Relief Road. It means that additional borrowing will now be at a higher rate, and it's stated so in this report. So the sooner this council receives the updated costs to continue with the very controversial and unpopular North West Relief Road, the sooner we can all understand how much extra money is going to cost us to repay that debt that will come out of Shropshire Council's revenue account. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans. Roger.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't think I can let this occasion pass without a comment that there's £143 million in cash sitting in our bank taxpayers' money, my money, your money. Some of that, most of that, should have been invested a long time ago, or we should have things in front of us, invest to save. 1%, 2%, 3%, even 4%, if we could get it, when inflation is at 10+%, does not make monetary sense. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, looking around the room. Okay, Brian, you reserved your right.
Can I just say that I don't think Councillor Buckley's comments had anything really to do with the Treasury strategy. Thank you. So far as the comments of the leader of the Liberal Democrats Party are concerned, this is really the council's ready purse, the money we use to pay our day-to-day debts and the money that comes in day by day from council tax and other sources. This is our spending money, basically, and it's, if I can draw attention to the fact that it is extremely well managed by the team under our Section 151 officer, James Walton. It consistently, our fund here outperforms the benchmark of funds of local authorities. We have an exceptionally good investment team, which performs extremely well, both investing the pension fund's money and investing the council's ready cash. And I'm happy to commend the whole strategy we have to the council for its endorsement. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Buckley, right reply. Willem.
Thank you. Welcome, sister. Yeah.
I thought you might know your second name. Sorry.
He did say Buckley, yeah. Sorry.
I did say Butler, yes. Councillor Butler. Willem.
Yeah, no
please.
worries. No worries. Thank you. First of all, obviously, once planning permission is gained on the North West Relief Road, a full business plan will be put forward where all those details will be laid bare. I believe that the interest rates at the moment are a peak, like inflation hopefully will be, and subject to other world matters, they will probably fall off within the next couple of years. I agree with the Chair of Audit's response to the current accounts. If we tied up all that money to get better interest rates and then we hadn't got the slush fund available, because most of that money is allocated for quite instant spend, it could put us in a precarious position. On that note, Chair, I move the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we are asked to receive and agree the report. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? It's unanimous. Thank you, members. We will move on to item 9, which is the annual scrutiny report, which has been deferred to the next meeting. Frankie, we might be home for Christmas. Maybe not. Okay, item 10, the Broseley Neighbourhood Development Plan adoption. I now invite Councillor Richard Marshall, the portfolio holder for Highways and Regulatory Service, to present the report. Move the report be received and agreed. Councillor Richard Marshall.
Thank you, Chair. The Broseley Neighbourhood Development Plan has been produced by the Broseley Neighbourhood Plan Steering Group, with Broseley Town Council acting as the qualifying body. Work initially started on the plan in 2018 and was submitted to an independent examiner in January 2022, which led to it being brought to local referendum in September of that same year, where a resounding 89.22% of those that voted wanted the plan to be used by Shropshire Council to help it decide planning applications in the neighbourhood area. All necessary requirements relating to the administration of this referendum were carried out, which is a very robust process. Subject to the Council's decisions today, the Broseley Neighbourhood Development Plan will become part of the statutory planning framework applied in Shropshire. Where this really becomes a good news story is the neighbourhood plan contains a range of locally produced policies which the community have expressly asked to be brought into play to help guide the decision-making process and allowing local people to have more of a say on local issues. Therefore, I'm more than happy to move to recommend that Shropshire Council, as a local planning authority, makes, i.e. adopts, the Broseley Neighbourhood Development Plan as set out in Appendix 1 and brings it into force with immediate effect as part of the development plan under the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I understand, Dan, you put your hand up. Is that second? And then I've got Caroline Bagnall. You put your hand up.
You want me to speak now?
Yes, Dan
Sorry,
seconded.
I thought you were speaking about seconding. Okay, thank you. I am Caroline Bagnall. I'm the member for Broseley. It's a very special place. I'm a newcomer there. I've only lived there 26 years. I grew up in Cumbria, but I have lived all over the place, including a cave on the side of a Greek mountain for a while. But living in Broseley is wonderful, and it's the place I want to stay. The reason I love Broseley is that it is historic, it's fascinating, there are amazing stories about the place. The history of the town is second to none. There wouldn't be an iron bridge if it wasn't for Broseley. We made the first iron boat, helped to make and pay for the first iron bridge. Broseley is an extremely special place. Goods manufactured there were transported all around the world. In fact, the other weekend I was in London, went to a small museum, and there was a set of Carthy china. So there's nothing that you can say about Broseley that possibly people would not be prepared to stand up and defend, because Broseley has a very, very loyal population. We haven't got a lot of the amenities that other places near to us have got, but we have got an enormous amount of pride. We've got wonderful architecture. We want to keep Broseley special. We want to stop infill. We want to stop buildings springing up all over the place. This neighbourhood plan protects the character of our town. If you haven't been to Broseley, please come. It's amazing. Look it up. There's loads to find out about. But I ask you finally to vote to approve this neighbourhood plan. A huge amount of volunteer hours have gone into this. It deserves to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That was an awful lot on the tourism. And we managed to touch a little bit on the development plan, but I do understand your passion. Okay. I will go back to Dan Thomas, who seconded, who reserved his right. Dan?
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I'd like to just speak in support of the motion as I second it today of adopting the Broseley Neighbourhood Development Plan. As many of you will know, part of Broseley falls within my Much One Lock electoral division. Broseley is a popular place to live with a strong economy and a high quality of life, which attracts people to live there. One aim of a neighbourhood development plan is to set out how the town will meet demand for the new homes in the most sustainable way. The voter turnout was affected to national crisis, but for those that did vote in Broseley, they overwhelmingly voted for this, with 89.22% of those voted wanted the plan to be used by Shropshire Council to help to decide planning applications in the area. This overwhelming mandate is a tribute to the hard work and dedication of many local people right across the town of Broseley, and it deserves unanimous support, and it's my pleasure to second the motion today.
Thank you very much. Councillor Richard Marshall.
Okay. Firstly, I'd like to say I feel a little bit inferior here today. As I tell you, I've never lived in a cave, so that's something new. I think it's clear to see that Councillor Bagley is very much in support of the Bagnall, in the report. So therefore, we can go to the vote. I move to recommend.
Thank you. Okay. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you. And well spoken, everybody. Broseley is a lovely place. Okay. Item 11, the Shropshire Economic Partnership Board. I now invite Councillor Dean Carroll, the portfolio holder for Growth and Regeneration and Housing, to present the report and move that the report be received and agreed. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you very much, Speaker. During COVID, we set up two partnership boards, two task force groups to help the county through the pandemic. One was the Social Task Force, which is still very successfully operating under the chairmanship of Councillor Butler. The other one was the Economic Partnership Task Force. What we're looking to do here today, as was recommended by Cabinet yesterday in its approval of the economic growth strategy for Shropshire, is to formalise that economic task force into a genuine partnership board. The success of the economic task force has been in bringing together not just Shropshire Council and public sector bodies, but the business community, the enablers of development, the enablers of growth, and the providers of infrastructure support and skills and learning together to help the growth of the Shropshire economy. This task force has co-authored and co-produced the economic growth strategy that has now been adopted by this council. And what we are looking to achieve by making this a formal partnership board is to bind together the successful partnership working that we've seen through the task force on a permanent basis within a formal governance structure. And this partnership board will then go forward to be the delivery partnership board that oversees Shropshire's proportion of the UK Share Prosperity Fund. This is a fantastic step forward for the county as it ensures that our economic growth ambitions are constantly being fed into and worked up alongside and in partnership with those who are actually having to put their money where their mouth is in growing the economy of Shropshire. The small, medium and large business people investing in Shropshire and providing jobs. So I propose to council recommendations 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 of the report. I am conscious that there's an amendment coming, but I'll wait to speak to that when that is called.
Okay, and I believe Councillor Jones, you're seconding.
I'd like to second it. And I'd like to speak a length on it later as well.
Okay. Yeah, you've got to propose it. I'm not going to propose it for you.
No, but you might have called me to speak. That was all.
All right. Would you like to speak?
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I'm proposing an amendment to recommendation 3.2. In part, this has already been addressed actually by Councillor Carroll. The report itself does not make mention of the social task force, which is unfortunate. But the fact that the new board brings together the social task force and the economic task force in part addresses the issue that I was raising. But I've actually got an additional concern now, because having done some digging to find out about this, it turns out that our bid for the UK Shared Prosperity Fund was not made public. The bid from Herefordshire is a public document, as is the governance arrangements. You can find it. It was published back in July. It turns out ours was done quietly. Now, and I've received the report, the bid this morning. Actually, there's some really good stuff in it. On very quick glance, it's quite long, but I am a bit concerned that bid went through and that we've now got money from the government on the basis of something that, frankly, none of the members here know anything about. So I'm hoping that there will be a little bit more transparency in the governance through this board. My concern initially was to make sure that we had a board which was properly representative of the whole county, and that was, that covered our market towns, our rural areas, but also had, I think at this stage we should be, when we're talking about shared prosperity, we really do need to think about how to do that in an inclusive way. So the idea was to make sure that we are also talking to the voluntary sector, that we're talking to different parts of our community, that we try and introduce a bit of gender balance, that we even try and introduce a bit of age balance into the board that is going to oversee this spending. In other words, that we don't simply rely on perhaps usual suspects to make decisions about spending large amounts of money. So that's the basis of the amendment, is to ensure that we have a properly properly inclusive and representative board. Thank you.
Thank you. And that is being seconded by Councillor Kerr. Councillor Kerr, would you like to speak? Nobody else has indicated, so.
I'll reserve my right to
All
speak
right.
today.
Well, you were nearly reserved and the only person, but another hand has gone up, fortunately, so. Oh, and Dean.
Councillor Halliday.
Yep, sorry,
I'd like to support this amendment. I think, as well as the points that Councillor Dean have made, I think this will add breadth to the committee. So I'd just like to support the amendment.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker.
All right. Dean, you'll have to come in at the end, I'm being told.
Unless you're happy with the amendment.
Unless you're happy. He's obviously no, shaking his head.
You
Councillor
come in,
Evans. People could put their hands up as the other person's speaking or just before they finish rather than 30 seconds after they finish. It does make it a bit easier for me.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to say that I completely concur with the amendment, and it is a pity it isn't included in it originally, and we will be supporting it.
Good. So I think we know how you're going to vote then. Okay. Duncan, you reserved your right.
Doesn't seem to have been any criticism of the amendment, so I look forward to it being unanimously supported. I mean, I think this is a line that we've taken in the Future Oswestry group, actually, to ensure that groups here which represent the economic partnership are properly representative of all facets of the community. And in terms of the Future Oswestry group, we've got voluntary sector reps on there now, and that's made a transformational difference, I think, to the work of that group. And I think it can do so equally across Shropshire. And the gender balance, we all need to get our heads around this. We all need to move towards much more representative organisations that are making decisions for everybody in Shropshire. We need to ensure they're inclusive and representative. So I fully support it.
Okay. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you very much, Speaker. So I'll take the amendment in stages. The first part, I apologise, Councillor Dean, if you've misunderstood something. I didn't say that we were merging the economic and social task forces. As I said, the social task force is continuing to operate very well. This is about converting the economic task force into a formal partnership board within a set governance arrangements so that it can oversee the UK Share Prosperity Fund, and so that we can bind it together for the long term to continue to improve and work with the council on driving forward the economic growth aspirations of the county as a whole. So let me make that crystal clear. The social task force will continue to operate and move forward. In terms of the content of the motion, the membership of the board is comprised of people who are able to bring value to the debate, and that is from across sectors, from across the business community, from across the public sector, from across the voluntary and third sector, from across education and infrastructure providers, and other people can and are brought into that as their skills and experience is required and helpful to the work of the partnership board. I don't believe it would add any value to the work of the partnership board to incorporate chairs of stakeholder groups just because they are chairs of stakeholder groups. The purpose of the partnership board is that it is a group of people who are able to make decisions and a group of people who have the expertise and experience in that field. For the same reasons, I disagree fundamentally with the idea of gender, or as I think Councillor Kerr mentioned, age quotas,
because I fundamentally believe that the right people should always be the right people for the job, regardless of filling quotas or ticking boxes.
Point of order.
There
Mr.
are
Chairman.
plenty of, I am quoting what you said, Councillor Kerr. There are plenty of men, women, old and young people who sit on the task force and are there on merit. And I fundamentally disagree with the idea of diversity quotas for box ticking exercises. People should be there on merit and because of what they can bring to an organisation. I recommend that we refuse this amendment and move back to the original motion. Thank you.
Okay. We have the amendment that has been proposed. I have just taken advice. Apparently we go to the vote now. Sorry? On the amendment, yeah. Sorry, Julian. We go to the vote. All those in favour of supporting the amendment, please show. All those against, please show. Yes, yeah. Okay, that amendment has fallen. So we will move back to the original. Is there anybody? Councillor Buckley.
Yeah, I'd just like to express my surprise that councillors Richard Marshall, Gary Burchett, Steve Davenport, Jeff Alner, Hilary Luff and Dan Morris voted against the opportunity to engage with, let me just quote their own motion, to request that groups working with climate change work constructively with both local and national government to achieve our mutually desired net zero targets. You seem a little confused today about how you want organisations to engage.
Okay, looking for hands. Okay, I will go back then to the originals and I'll find it first. Councillor Jones, I think you reserved your right, didn't you, some time ago?
I did, yeah. I've just joined the team, Dean's deputy. I think he undersold what's going on at the moment. There's a lot of exciting projects going all over Shropshire, even in the south. We even have to look in the south, so it's fantastic. And if you look at the second report with this, it's very colourful, just like the author, Mark Barrow. And I think there's a lot to commend what's going on in Shropshire. We do get bogged down with budgets and things like that, but there's some very exciting things that are going on in Shropshire. So I commend the report and vote for it as well. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Speaker. I'm amazed how those on the left can turn even a positive into a negative, but that seems to say something more about their approach to life than it does about their genuine desire to drive forward the economic growth of the people of Shropshire. For the record, Councillor Buckley, I will never apologise for believing that people should be where they are on merit and patronising people by only placing them there to fill a diversity quota. So I recommend, as I did at the start
that would be good
of this conversation, at the start of this debate, that we approve recommendations 3.1, 3.2 and 3.3 to council.
Thank you. Okay, all those in favour of supporting, please show. Yeah, I don't think we need to count. That's clearly going to be just so those who want to stick their hand up can. Anybody against or absentees? Okay.
Could you also take abstentions, please?
Sorry?
Could you please take abstentions on that?
I just asked for abstention.
You know, you
Did
just
you not
asked for
put your
votes
hand up?
against. You just asked for votes against.
No, I didn't. I did use the word abstention as well. I didn't actually. Julian,
can't do
thank you
both
for-
at the same
Julian,
time.
Julian, thank you. Please don't tell me how to do my job. It was clearly passed. I didn't need to take those against or abstentions. I could have just stopped where I was, but I gave those the opportunity to put their hand in the air who did not want to vote for it or wanted to abstain, and I used both words, and that's it. Thank you very much.
Chair, can I just ask for a clarification, please, on debate? It's my understanding that if you don't sit for the whole of the debate, then you're excluded from voting. Is that correct?
No, I did take advice on that.
No. Sorry. What I'm saying is, if you walk out of the debate or are not at the debate for all of it, can you vote on it?
Yeah, you just asked me that, and I said I've taken advice on it, and you can. It's only in planning and.
Thank you very
can't.
much.
So
cheers.
There you go. All right, good. We will move on to item 12, which is the recruitment. Sorry, can we just have one voice, if that's all right? Thank you. Which is the recruitment of co-opted independent members for the Audit Committee. I now invite Councillor Gwilym Butler, the portfolio holder for Finance and Corporate Resources, to present the report. Move the report be received and agreed. Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, during our LGA peer review, this was one of the recommendations that came forward. Again, it is what it is, as stated in the paper. I'll be very interested to see who actually applies for it. Somebody's obviously got amnesia, I'd have thought. But anyway, I move the report as the recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, and I believe that is being seconded by, is that you, Leslie?
No.
Oh, no, Brian, who's already on his feet.
I've been a member of one council or another for 60 years now, and I've always stood to speak at council. I believe that it is a courtesy to councillors, other councillors, that we rise to speak, and a courtesy to the chair that we rise to speak. So that's why I rise to speak when I want to speak. I second this recommendation to the council with some lack of enthusiasm, because I don't think it's going to add any value to our conclusions at audit. The audit committee was set up following the council elections to the old Shropshire Council in 2005. And I have been the chair, I was the first chairman, and I have been the chairman of the audit committee for all but 5 years since 2005. And we are a non-political committee. We seldom have anything other than a unanimous vote. We operate and have operated very satisfactorily, with no criticism from this council in all that time. We also are fortunate, and I can say as a council, to have an audit team of officers who are on numerous occasions recommended for awards for their efficiency. But that is something I'm pleased to mention at this time. So I don't know how this is actually going to add any real value to the audit committee. However, it is government policy that audit committees, whether in the public or the private sector, should have an independent member. And that government policy is reinforced by the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, who also think that audit committee or independent members, like motherhood and apple pie, are good things. So it seems to me that we have to go with the flow, and this report before you is an enabling report. It simply gives us the power to go out and see if there's anybody out in the big wide world who wants to be an independent member of our audit committee. And many of us have doubts that there are a queue of people out there waiting to join us. So eventually, if we find somebody, It will have to come back to the council at the annual meeting because it will require an amendment to the council's constitution. So you will hear more of this again at our annual council in May. But in the meanwhile, through gritted teeth, I second this report.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Vivian Parry and then Councillor.
I don't do this very often. I agree with everything you just said. I really honestly think that the way it's been run all these years has been the best way, and I really appreciate everything you've done. Thank you.
Very kind. Thank you.
Councillor Rosemary Dartnell.
Thank you. As a member of the Audit Committee, I welcome the proposal. Nothing to do with apple pie or motherhood. It's come to us via the LGA peer review, and the idea is to recruit, as we know, an external voluntary member to the Audit Committee. There are many talented people in Shropshire who want to give back to society. They give their time and experience for the greater good. Probably many people in this room who do that for no recompense. All companies and institutions I've experienced personally have benefited immensely from the fresh perspective of external members, such as non-executive directors on company boards, external charity trustees, school governors, and so on. Best practice for all constituted groups, companies, organisations, institutions, democratic bodies are stronger for adhering to the best practice of incorporating a wide variety of views in decision making. It's a sign of institutional maturity and confidence, and it demonstrates an ability to self-reflect. And the work of the Audit Committee will be even stronger for having an external voluntary member. My fingers are crossed for a healthy and diverse pile of applications.
Councillor Buckley.
Just want to also add that I've attended a couple of times to observe the Audit Committee, and I agree with Councillor Williams. It's a really impressive committee doing a lot of very detailed and complex work. I'd just like to add, as I understand it, any independent member would not have voting rights. So they really are only there to add a sort of an external view, and that the elected members will retain their primacy on the committee. So I hope that you will embrace the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. I haven't got any other hands, so I'll go back to Councillor Gwilym Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, I haven't got a problem with this. I think it is a good way forward. I welcome the feelings of people who have spoken that we will have lots of people, a big pile of applicants, but I shall wait and see. So I move the report, Chair.
Good. Well, there you go. We've had a few speakers on it. Report's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Any abstentions? No, that's unanimous. Thank you. We will move on to item 13, which is the Local Government Social Care Ombudsman Report, Fault Finding of Injustice. I invite Councillor Dean Carroll, the Portfolio for Golf Regeneration and Housing, to present and move the report be received and agreed. Councillor Carroll.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be familiar with this Ombudsman's decision. Please note that an apology has been issued as required, and the service has accepted the recommendations and has undertaken to learn the lessons arising from it. I move that we note the report.
Thank you. Seconded by?
I'm happy to second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. You want to say anything, Ms. Seconder?
No, thank you.
Okay. All those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? No. Unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to item 14, which is the allocation of committee seats and appointments. I move that the report and recommendations of the Assistant Director of Legal Governance be received and agreed.
I'm happy to second that report.
Good. So, Julia, Councillor Buckley.
Thank you. We welcome this report, which we requested to come forward following the two recent by-elections, which have changed the political makeup of the council. And taking advice from the LGA legal team, we've collectively, with all the political groups, looked at ways to change the numbers on committees to try to achieve the various principles. One, that the Conservatives retain their majority on all committees, and 2, that the council be proportionate, i.e. that the numbers on each committee and across all committees be proportionate to those elected. The report coming forward nearly does that. It's 99% there, except there is still an anomaly whereby the Labour group is underrepresented by 1 member and the Conservative is overrepresented by 1 member. We've submitted an amendment, which you should all have received, asking that you consider that we agree to change the membership of the Pensions Committee to redistribute 1 place from the Conservatives to Labour. If you look at the mathematics on that committee, the Conservatives are entitled to 2.22 and they're currently allocated 3. Labour should have 0.54 and we're currently allocated 0. So out of a total of 4 seats from this authority, the Conservatives would have 2, Liberal and Labour would have 1 each. This is a joint committee with Telford and Wrekin, so we do not have any say over the majority of that committee. And as the Conservatives are in the chair, they would also have a casting vote. We feel this is fair and proportionate. We think it's a straightforward ask. And if we can achieve that, then we would have complete proportionality on every committee in this council, and we would have aggregate proportionality. It's important not just to the Labour group, whichever group you are in, when the next by-election comes your way, this will matter very much to you. And as I've said many times, to much hilarity from the Conservatives, come the next local elections, of course, when Labour take control of the council, it will matter very much indeed to all of you. The number 1 rule in politics is that we all accept the rules of the game. If you accept the rules of the game, you don't mind if you win or lose. The rules of the game must be fair and equitable. This report is about achieving proportionality, and I ask you to accept the amendment so that as of today, this council will be proportionate. And then whatever happens going forward, we will all endeavour to keep making sure it's proportionate for every party. Thank you.
Thank you. Looking for a seconder.
I'll second that and reserve my right.
Thank you, Councillor Parsons. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a great believer in democracy. I believe this council is a great believer in democracy. The Local Government Acts, as appropriate, say that all committees should ensure that two important items. The committees which are making decisions, and that's my interpretation about making decisions, the administration, the overall majority party should have a majority on that committee, which we have. And it's important that those committees, which I said, that make decisions. The Pensions Committee, and I echo the comments that was made a few minutes ago about the Audit Committee, have never gone into politics. As a member of that Pensions Committee, we all look at the issues on behalf of the pensioners and also the contributors to make the best decisions possible. That is not a Shropshire Council decision-making committee. It is a joint committee between Shropshire and Telford and Wrekin. They put their members on it. Shropshire Council put their members on it. And in the interests of proportionality of the full council, Labour, unfortunately for me, I would prefer more members, Liberal Democrats. Maybe we will in the future, but at the present time, Labour are entitled to 15 members amongst the committees of Shropshire Council. At present, they are allocated 14 because the Conservatives need 61 seats under the 109 there in order to get the majority on all the committees. In fact, they've got 62, I think, if one looks at it, which is one more. And that is looking at the Pensions Committee enables, if Labour take a seat there and the Conservatives give up a seat, it comes back to the proportionality of this council using the 109 ratio, which is proposed. And therefore, the proportionality rule rules, as does the other rule that committees who are making decisions have a majority of the administration as part of it. So this really, really does strike right at the basic of democracy. Does the council believe in democracy and following the proportionality rule? I would say we do, and I hope this amendment is supported. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Looking for hands.
Sorry, can I
Leslie.
just speak to this? Because I'll speak to the amendment because I just want to make sure that members in the room exactly understand what's happened over the last few weeks. The officers did approach me due to the recent by-election results, and in conjunction with the leader of the Labour group and also the leader of the Liberal Democrat group, we did agree, and my members certainly know about this because they've all been informed, that we would change the scrutiny committees from 10 to 9, therefore losing those 5 Conservative seats to make the proportionality more fair. What neither Councillor Buckley nor Councillor Evans have actually said to you today is that it doesn't matter what the committee is. The political balance rules apply to the Pensions Committee in the usual way, and they also apply to joint committees where at least 3 seats are allocated to the authority. 3 seats are allocated to Shropshire Council on this authority, on that committee, and therefore the Conservatives have, which I can't remember whether it was Councillor Evans or Councillor Buckley mentioned, that the Conservatives have to have the majority. Therefore, there are 3 seats on that committee. Political balance rules do apply. Therefore, we require the 3 seats. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Okay. That was the Buckley indicator. Sorry, Julie, I can't let you in. You don't get the opportunity to close up on the amendment. I've had no other. We will move to voting on the amendment as proposed and seconded. All those in favour of supporting, please show. Those against, please show. Any abstentions? No. Okay, the amendment has fallen. You will be allowed to speak on the original.
Mr. Chairman, could we have the numbers, please?
Well, you can if you want.
3827.
There you go, Roger. You'll pick them as lottery numbers, are you? I hope they don't win now I said that, because we'll all have them. Okay, so we will go back to the original item. Councillor Buckley, now you can speak.
So I had wanted to correct Councillor Picton because the Pensions Committee has allocated 4 seats to Shropshire Council, and the LGA's legal advisor describes the 3 allocated to the Conservatives and 1 to Lib Dem as a perverse outcome of the proportionality rule on smaller committees with even numbers, because we sought their legal advice and they felt that this particular distribution did not meet the rules. As I explained, because the Conservatives are in the chair, they have a casting vote, which would give them 2 + 1 compared to 1 for the Lib Dems and 1 for Labour. And I felt that that was a pretty good compromise for those in the room. I'm incredibly disappointed that members in this room will not set aside their political party allegiance to agree a fair and equitable proportionality in this council room. I think that you are pretty naive if you don't think that the colours of the parties in this room are not going to change in the years that come ahead. I hope our party and those to my left will continue to uphold some ethics and uphold proportionality, even when our numbers outnumber yours. because what you have done today is not proportionate and therefore not acceptable, our group, and I believe the other opposition parties, will not and cannot vote in support of this report. We will also be pursuing the legal advice to challenge why you have allowed this to go ahead. The purpose of this report was to achieve proportionality. Therefore, it has failed.
Thank you. I'm not sure everybody would agree with your perspective on that, but there we go. So I haven't got any other hands, so I am going to go back to Councillor Brian Williams, as it says in here, but I think that's supposed to be Williams. Brian?
Thank you, Chairman. I think it's important to recognise that the Pension Committee doesn't just consist of councillors. The Pensions Committee also has advice to the committee from pensioners. There are representative pensioners. The Pensions Committee also represents far more than just Shropshire Council and Telford and Wrekin. There are something of the order of 40 to 50 actual employers, big and small, who are in the Pensions Committee. Some of those are academies, some of those are even contractors working for the council, are entitled to apply for membership. So the Pensions Committee represents a far wider range of interests than just those of the councillors. And I ask the council to recognise this and support the original report, which quite frankly gives the opportunity, if necessary, for Telford and Wrekin to put all Labour members on. We have no control over who Telford and Wrekin put on as their voting members. So it simply is essential that we support the allocation of seats across the council as a whole, which includes the Pension Committee. And I can offer the original report for support by the council.
Thank you. I'm sure members will be glad to hear that. I've really got nothing to say on it other than for something so non-political, we've managed to completely politicise it. But hey, there you go. All right. So all those in favour of the original, please show. I mean, I would say that's clearly in favour, but I know Roger probably needs 4 more numbers. So, would you like me to have a count of hands for those against Roger? Or? Well, it's a courtesy really that I'm offering because that's clearly passed. So those against, please show. And any abstentions? No, good. Okay. When it is clearly in favour, I won't be taking a show of hands for the against from now on. Otherwise, we might be here until Christmas Day. It takes too long. When it looks close, then I will do that. When it doesn't, I won't. Okay. That has passed. Thank you. So we'll move on to item 15, which is notices of motion. The first one I have in front of me is from Councillor Rob Wilson and will be supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Rob.
Thank you. I believe you have an amendment to take first.
No, you need to present your bit first, and then somebody can present an amendment on it.
Okay, thank you then. In the last 10 years, 170 people have been killed on Shropshire's roads. Quite simply, this motion says that one death is too many, and we need to make reducing the number to 0 a clear priority for this council. It's neither inevitable nor acceptable that anyone should be killed or seriously injured when travelling in Shropshire. When we leave our homes each day, we should still feel safe and confident about the journey ahead. Yet for 121 people last year alone, that wasn't the case. Today, I'm calling on all of us to draw a line in the sand and say that with one voice, we in Shropshire will reduce the number of people killed or seriously injured to zero. If death or serious injury from road traffic crashes on the UK's roads were a cancer, it would represent the 5th leading new cancer diagnosis in the country. This is a public health emergency. Health inequalities also play a big part. Children in the most deprived 20% of areas are 6 times more likely to be injured than those in the least deprived 20%. And 16 children are killed or seriously injured in road crashes every week on their way to or from school. Unfortunately, curing cancer is not in our remit, but reducing death and serious injuries in Shropshire absolutely is. Following several tragic deaths in and around the River Severn, a comprehensive review has been commissioned by Shropshire Council. This uses the ROSPA hierarchy of risk control, which states the most effective action is elimination of danger. In a road context, this would mean stopping people from travelling, which of course is completely impractical and nonsensical. This is why Vision Zero specifically rules out approaches discouraging vulnerable people from using the roads at all and reducing their mobility options. The next most effective is substitution and engineering controls. In a general sense, this means smaller vehicles and separation of modes of transport. The least effective is PPE, body armour, helmets and high visibility clothing. Vision Zero is about reframing our attitude to road danger and collisions. Professor Rachel Aldred from the University of Westminster and journalist Laura Laker have developed the Road Collision Reporting Guidelines. Professor Aldred said, "The research tells us that language matters, as it helps shape how we see and treat others. So, for instance, referring to drivers rather than only their vehicles helps remind us that behind every vehicle, be it a car, an HGV, a cycle or motorcycle, is a person making decisions that affect the safety of others." The resulting 10 guidelines are supported by prominent organisations of professionals, including the AA, the FIA Foundation, Road Peace, the Transport Research Laboratory, and Transport for London, British Cycling, Sustrans, Cycling UK, and Living Streets. As a council, we should incorporate these guidelines into our documentation and communications. We should also be asking others in Shropshire, such as our local newspapers and radio stations, to do the same, as well as our partners such as West Mercia Police. Shropshire Council is currently reviewing the key performance indicators that will support the Shropshire Plan. I'm pleased that number of people killed or seriously injured in a road traffic accident is on the list, but I would ask that accident is replaced by crash or collision. Vision Zero may seem like a theory, something that is unachievable. It has already been achieved. The government in Norway has made a strong commitment to eliminate serious injuries and fatalities on their roadways nationally, and has worked towards this vision for nearly 2 decades. In 2015, the city of Oslo made a commitment toward Vision Zero. As a result, between 2014 and 2018, the risk of fatal or serious road traffic injuries on a trip-by-trip basis has fallen 47% for cyclists, 41% for pedestrians, and 32% for drivers. Other local authorities in the UK have adopted this approach, notably in London, but most recently in Oxfordshire, which is not much different to our own county. I'm sure that all members will agree that road deaths and injuries are unacceptable, and we as a council should act to eliminate them. By voting for this motion today, we can adopt a policy which will reduce road deaths and injuries in Shropshire to zero. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, let's see, this is supported by the Liberal Democrat group, but can I have a name to second, please? Thank you. Councillor Batsma. Okay. Are you going to speak now? Okay. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Dartnell. We in the Labour Group are proposing an amendment to the motion. Can I now speak to that?
Yep.
Yep. We fully support this motion. It's forward thinking and it's what we must do to protect the public, whether they're drivers, pedestrians, cyclists, whatever, on our roads. Since the widespread use of sat-navs began around 2008, local neighbourhoods have experienced a huge increase in through traffic. implementing a universal all Shropshire 20 mile per hour speed limit in all residential areas, whether urban or rural, is a low-cost policy with a proven golden thread of gains. These include road safety improvements, reduced environmental pollution in neighbourhoods, noise reduction, improved health, improved social connectivity between homes, improved, especially respiratory health in children. Sorry, that was about improved health. Emissions are significantly reduced, comparing 30 to 20 mile an hour speeds in motor cars or other vehicles, 26% reduction in carbon emissions and 28% in nitrous oxide. Very difficult to achieve otherwise. 20 is Plenty, which is a campaign across the UK wanting to bring 20 as a limit in all residential areas. On their website say the following: higher vehicle speeds blight communities and inhibit the ability of residents to walk, cycle and use public transport. It is clear that lower speeds save lives and reduce pollution, and that 20 miles an hour can be the cornerstone of building inclusive communities. In successive UK government surveys, 70% said that 20 miles an hour was the right speed limit for residential streets. So I ask members to accept this amendment and adopt a 20 mile an hour residential speed limit in the interests of all in Shropshire.
Thank you, Rosemary. Seconded by? Oh, thank you. Well done. Okay. Can't see any hands. Ms. Seconder, would you like to say something? Well, I know, but you can reserve the right. You're the only speaker, so I can go to the vote if you want, and then you won't be able to say anything.
Well, it seems self-evident, and we've discussed this on numerous occasions through the years, that 20 miles an hour limits do significantly save lives and save the risk of serious injury. This is part and parcel of the motion that the overarching motion that is about zero deaths and massive reductions in collisions, and it seems to make sense to highlight this as a specific factor that we ought to be working towards now and not putting it off any later.
Thank you. Okay, we will move to the vote on the amendment from Councillor Dartnell.
Mr. Speaker, I think the mover of the motion has a right of reply to the amendment.
Well, okay, if you would like to reply to your seconder.
Oh, I said the mover of the motion, of the original motion, has the right of reply to the amendment.
But he's not indicated. I would expect the mover of the... Oh, right, okay, Rob, sorry, I didn't see you.
Thank you. I am absolutely in support of 20 mile an hour residential limits, but I think it's important that we put to the vote, because I know it's something that's been disputed before in this chamber, and I would on that like to request a recorded vote.
$31.15, isn't it? Okay. I would ask if you want to speak, even if you are the original proposer of the original motion, please do indicate. Thank you.
So this is a vote now.
On the, we're voting on the amendment. It's a recorded vote. So,
Roy Allcroft.
Against.
Jeff Anderson. Caroline Bagnall. Nicholas Bardsley. Joyce Barrow. Bernie Bentic.
Against.
Thomas Biggins. Edward Bird. Andy Boddington. Peter Broomhall. Julia Buckley.
For.
Gary Birchett. Gwilym Butler.
Against.
Dean Carroll. Steve Charmley. Rachel Connolly, Rosemary Dartnell, Steve Davenport, Mary Davies, Julian Dean, Jeff Elner, David Evans, Julia Evans, Roger Evans,
4,
Paul Gill, Nat Green, Kate Halliday, Simon Harris, Nigel Hartin, Nick Hignett, Ruth Houghton, Richard Huffer, Tracy Huffer, Vince Hunt,
Against.
Kirsty Hurst-Knight, Mike Isherwood, Mark Jones, Simon Jones, Duncan Kerr, Heather Kidd, Christian Lee, Hilary Luff, Nigel Lumby, Elliot Lynch, Robert Macy, Richard Marshall, Dan Morris, Pam Mosley,
For.
Alan Mosley, Cecilia Motley, Peggy Mullock, Ian Nellins, Kevin Pardy, Viv Parry, Tony Parsons, Leslie Picton, Ed Potter, Chris Schofield, Dan Thomas, Edward Towers, David Vasmer, Alex Wagner, Claire Wilde, Brian Williams, Rob Wilson, Paul Wynne. Thank you.
Twenty-seven for, 38 against, so the amendment has fallen. We will go back to the original motion.
Mr. Speaker, may I?
Yep, you may. You have every right to, as everybody else does.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Councillor Wilson, I did actually write to you making a suggestion regarding this motion, but I didn't receive a response. If I take you back to, I think it was the council meeting of September of last year, it may have been July, forgive me, you brought a motion to council which was about putting monies into a highways budget for certain things. And the one thing I said at the time was that I was not willing to commit this council to expenditure via a motion which is uncosted. You say in your visions, in your motion, that this has, I think, little financial impact on the council. I beg to differ on that. The advice that I have been given, and also advice from other sources, and one of which I will quote to you in a moment because I think it is quite interesting, is that this can have significant impact on council's finances at a time when you are well aware that we have very limited budgetary work. Now, I don't think there is a huge amount in this motion that in general, most members on the left-hand side, as I'm looking, would agree with. But I am not willing to commit finance on this council which is uncosted as far as this motion goes. What I asked you was, please defer it, come back with an idea of cost, and then we would look at it again. I think the most interesting document that I found was actually written by Professor John Whiteleg and Gary Hack, which is actually about Vision Zero, where it says one of the biggest issues around Vision Zero is the financial cost and the difficulty in costing that. So I'm sorry, Rob, it's not that we don't agree with it. And Rosemary, please don't think we don't agree with some of the 20-mile-an-hour work. Members on my side of the chamber are working on that at the moment, but I will not commit this council to finance that it simply doesn't have. So I'm very sorry, Rob, but we will be voting down this motion. Thank you.
Councillor Morris and then Councillor Dean.
Can I fully associate myself with the comments of the leader? Furthermore, we currently have 20-mile-an-hour speed limit trials in Port Hill, and we're also looking at 20-mile-an-hour speed limits outside schools, and that is an ongoing process. So I would suggest that we are looking at this and carefully costing it out, and to commit ourselves to a fully uncosted thing like this in times of austerity would be irresponsible.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you. First of all, the concept of Vision Zero is, of course, in the end, a cost-saving exercise for the public sector, because we know that accidents actually cost the public sector money, whether or not they cost the council money directly. There's so quite apart from saving lives, in the long run, it's actually cheaper for us to be safe. But I'm very confused because the report does not commit to huge spending of money. It commits to instruct officers to bring a paper to Cabinet within 12 months to address how these points will be achieved. If at that point the Tories then decide, no, we can't afford to save lives, then you can make that decision at that point. But it doesn't actually commit us to spending money. And, we've done this with river safety. We've had reports which presumably will result in some spending. This seems to be a very strange decision to avoid even considering the options. So I support the motion.
Thank you. Councillor Roger Evans and then Councillor Heather Kidd. Roger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't know the council could spend £1. I thought it was the Cabinet that allocates money as per the policies set by the council. I refer back a number of years ago now, 5, 6, it seems like it seems ages ago, to the council decision about 20-mile-an-hour outside schools. It took over nearly 2 years for that to start to do it. Council is not spending money. Council is saying this is what is wanted. So to say that it is uncosted, I don't think is a relevant argument to this. Council sets policy and then the Cabinet interprets it and allocates money as it decides. That is how this council decided when it went to the Cabinet system many years ago. And I would suggest that is the way this could be adjusted and do it. So I am surprised to hear the argument that was put forward a few minutes ago. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Councillor Heather Kidd.
Thank you. It's an interesting one that we now have to cost everything. I do remember Dan Morris's motion coming forward, which I fully supported, about the 20-mile-an-hour outside school. And presumably, as that was uncosted, we shouldn't have actually been given the opportunity to support that. It is a very slowly being rolled out. I still support it because actually I have many children who can't safely walk to school in Worthing. I keep doing this, but actually, if we now have a rule about costed motions or uncosted motions, then we need this to be absolutely clear and it needs to be fair across the board, because Dan Morris's motion was not costed at the time. Although I did support that, no, it was not costed at the time. I would really like at this point to plea for a rural pilot, wherever that might be, for the rollout of schools, because actually they're all, or both of them that have gone forward, are urban and I need more to that. It also would aid exercise, it would aid zero carbon, it would aid many, many things wherever it happens. But this issue about costed or uncosted now has to be clear for the future and not just for now. And I'm far from sure that this actually does require huge costing. And if something is turned down in the future because it doesn't appear to be costed, then we need to see the exact reasoning as to why it appears to be costed, it needs to be costed, because otherwise lots of things can be turned down. So it's a procedural matter, but actually a plea for rural pilots too on the 20 mile an hour.
Thank you. I've now got councillors Richard Marshall and Duncan Kerr. Then I'm minded to try and draw a little bit. Okay, Rosemary. After that, I'm going to draw a little bit of a line under this because we had a fair bit of debate on the amendment as well about the original, which covered the original motion. So, Richard, councillor.
Okay, thank you, Chair. I've listened to this debate so far and about the cost, but I'll also declare I have thoroughly looked into the whole of this Vision Zero ideology, basically. And I know in the original report, Councillor Wilson started to speak about Oslo and how they achieve zero deaths. That figure in itself is not strictly true. They achieve zero vulnerable road user deaths. There was deaths of motorists, but it's also interesting to note in Oslo, the car is banned in the majority of the city, which, you know, that's a little bit of a totalitarian state to be banning cars from everything. In the other areas that the cars were not banned, there is physical structure and barriers separating cars with cyclists and people walking, pedestrians. So therefore, I think it is very, very fair of the leader to state that there is significant cost attached to this motion. And without those costs of the infrastructure to separate and divide, it can't really be passed. You're actually asking not only for us to adopt the vision, you're asking us to give a date as well of when that vision will be in place. And so I'm in absolute full agreement with the leader. There's no costing on this at all.
Councillor Duncan Kerr.
Yeah, it's curious as to why residents in Essex and Kent have probably got more financial problems than any other council in the county. Is it 50 million they overspend, the auditors have told them? So residents of those are benefiting from a council that is willing to set a Vision Zero target. And residents of Shropshire are just told, oh no, you can't afford it, without ever costings to turn it down, because there's no costings you're arguing to adopt it, and equally you've got no costings to turn it down. It is a direction of travel, it's a vision, and it sets out a commitment. And that's why your peers, Conservative-run councils in Essex and Kent, have adopted it. There's nothing unconservative about doing that, and I'd urge you to do the same here.
Councillor Rosemary Dartnell, then we're going to...
Thank you very much. The leader's comments about the 20 mile an hour speed limit in residential areas. I'd just like to point out that it's generally considered to be the case that universal adoption of that throughout an area such as Shropshire is far less costly than adopting and more effective than adopting it piecemeal, which is what the council is doing by doing it outside certain schools and so on and so forth. So that's point number one about finance. So perhaps it might be more fiscally responsible to look at a universal adoption of that policy. Also, Councillor Kerr's just said many of the things I was going to say. This motion isn't about leaving here and this afternoon ripping up our roads and replacing them with perfect, safe, Vision Zero roads and cycle lanes and so on and so forth. It's about setting a vision, setting an ambition for safety. And for me, I just can't imagine that, well, I can't understand why we couldn't do that, why we don't want to do that. It's about saying whenever we change any road setup, we look at it from a Vision Zero point of view. And that is the way forward. We have to change to make our roads safer. So why not adopt this as an underlying policy and use it to inform how we move forward? It doesn't, of course, achieving perfection would be costly, but that's not what's being asked for here. We're asking for an ambition.
Thank you. Councillor Vasmer, you seconded and at the beginning, some time ago.
Yes,
Reserved your right.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you. Yes, so the mask really has fallen off the Conservatives here today, hasn't it? They really are the nasty party. I mean, it's, here we're talking about reducing deaths, reducing serious injuries on our roads, and yet the Tory party wants to do absolutely nothing about it. This is a great motion. We're adopting a Vision Zero, which will inform all the activities of the Highways Department, really, in terms of its planning, in terms of its design of roads. It's a new vision. It's a different way of approaching road design. I mean, it's something which we should adopt now, because we're not calling for the kind of barriers which Councillor Marshall talked about. We're not talking about that. What we're talking about in item 6 is that we investigate this, get officers to investigate this and come back to Cabinet and make a report. Just as we did, by the way, on the A41 motion. I don't know if perhaps I ought to remind Tory councillors here that we had a motion about the A41, which of course we all supported, about reducing death and injuries on the A41, which was quite right. I supported it, but we didn't have any costings for that, did we? I wonder why we haven't asked for costings today. And the reason is because the Conservatives don't want to support this. They don't really support taking real action to reduce deaths on our roads. Basically, what happens in this council a lot of the time is that we get motions like the School Streets motion, like 20 mile per hour motion, and it takes ages to get them implemented. And now we really have the mask is off. They don't really want to do anything. They'd rather carry on as we have been, and we see an increasing number of deaths on our roads. We need to tackle this. We need to do something about it. And this motion sets out a way forward. It doesn't actually say that we should commit ourselves to money. It just says, here is a way of reducing deaths on our roads. Here is a way of organising ourselves better in the future. And it's a great shame that the Conservative Party here today are not supporting it.
Thank you. I sometimes wonder if I'm listening to the same debate as some members, but there you go. So, Rob, back to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Just some responses. Councillor Picton is correct that I did bring a motion to ask for more money to be spent on the barriers which Councillor Marshall has suggested. That was rejected. I understand why, because although it didn't commit to a capital sum, it did commit to a percentage sum. I'm disappointed that nothing further has been brought forward by the administration, but that's where we are. As others have said, all this motion does really is ask for a report to come to Cabinet in 12 months. I imagine that would make some recommendations, which the Cabinet could then choose to reject, depending on finances and costings as developed by officers. That's all it's asking for. If at that moment in time, the Cabinet decides that we do not have the money to reduce KSIs on our roads, then that's what they decide. I disagree, but that's the decision they make with the political makeup of this council. Councillor Dean, you've talked about doing a papers cabinet. I think members obviously be very wise to listen to him. I absolutely agree with Councillor Roger Evans. This is about setting policy, not about talking about budgeting and financing. Councillor Heather Kidd's comment about having this actually moving out into our rural areas is a really, really important point. I don't really want to get into Councillor Marshall's culture war about ideology and totalitarianism. I think that's really unhelpful in debates such as this. I really don't want to see Shropshire Council head down the line that some other councils have done. I think, unfortunately, he is trying to take us that way, and we would do well to resist that. Councillor Kerr, yes, absolutely, is setting a vision, as we did with the climate emergency that was declared in this room, I think probably 3 years ago. I think it was actually the actual successful motion in the end was brought by Councillor Carroll. I don't believe there were any costings in that motion either, but that has driven a lot of the work that we have done since, and I applaud that. And Councillor Dart's correct. Currently, what we're doing is very piecemeal, and we should bring things together into one coherent policy, which, as Councillor Dean said earlier, could actually save the public sector money. And I know this is going to be unpopular, but I would like to request another recorded vote.
I think that's enough. I don't think you need to count them. Okay, recorded vote it will be. I suspect it may be very similar to the last one, but Chief Executive.
Roy Allcroft,
Against.
Jeff Anderson,
Against.
Caroline Bagnall, Nicholas Bardsley, Joyce Barrow, Bernie Bentinck,
For.
Thomas Biggins, Edward Bird, Andy Boddington, Peter Broomhall, Julia Buckley,
For.
Gary Birchett, Gwilym Butler, Dean Carroll,
Against.
Steve Charmley, Rachel Connolly, Rosemary Dartnall, Steve Davenport, Mary Davies, Julian Dean, Jeff Elner, David Evans, Julia Evans, Roger Evans,
For.
Paul Gill, Nat Green, Kate Halliday, Simon Harris, Nigel Hartin, Nick Hignett, Ruth Houghton, Richard Huffer, Tracy Huffer, Vince Hunt,
Against.
Kirsty Hurst Knight, Mike Isherwood, Mark Jones, Simon Jones, Duncan Kerr, Heather Kidd, Christian Lee, Hilary Luff, Nigel Lumby, Elliot Lynch, Robert Macy, Richard Marshall, Dan Morris, Pam Mosley,
For.
Alan Mosley, Cecilia Motley, Peter Mullock, Peggy Mullock, excuse me. Excuse me.
Peter?
My sincere apologies. Peggy Mullock, Ian Nellings, Kevin Pardy, Viv Parry, Tony Parsons, Leslie Picton, Ed Potter, Chris Schofield, Dan Thomas, Edward Towers, David Vasmer, Alex Wagner, Claire Wild, Brian Williams, Rob Wilson, Paul Wynne. Thank you.
That seems to have been a debate of Freudian slips and votes. Okay, that is 27 for and 38 against, so that motion has fallen. We will move on to the next motion, therefore, which
Mr. Speaker, I have a point of order on this next motion.
Is it legal or procedural?
Can I speak?
Well, you
Okay.
can, but
Under-
I'm just laying the ground. It will need to either be Because you don't believe it's legal, or because you don't believe that we're following
Under the Constitution, on pages D15 and D16, I wish to move a motion without notice under 17.I. I will now expand on that. That is to proceed to next business, which is a legal motion and can be moved without notice.
Okay, well, I am being told by our legal beagle that you are allowed to do that. So
Okay.
we will need to vote on that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
You're very welcome.
I wish to speak on that because it is a motion, and as a motion, I'm, as far
It's
as
all new
I'm
to me,
aware,
so if
I
you
need
see me
to
looking
be
to the
able to
right-
speak and put the reasons why.
Yeah, okay. Is it seconded?
Okay, thank you. A number of years ago, this council had a motion before it about the Royal Shrewsbury Hospital. At that time, that council meeting lasted 5 minutes because at that time, the interpretation of the majority attending that meeting was that it did not fall within the remit of Shropshire Council. Therefore, it couldn't happen. I have spoken to the legal officer. His interpretation is that motions must be about matters for which the council has a responsibility or which affect the area. I don't think it has responsibility, and I don't think it affects the area. So I think this motion should not be debated. It is a waste of council time. So therefore, I propose that we move on to next business.
Okay, that's seconded. Okay. We will take a vote on it, but before we do, I happen to know for a fact that some of our haulage businesses who are based in Shropshire and employ Shropshire people got stuck in the protests down in the south, which negatively impacted their businesses. That's one of the reasons.
Move to vote, Mr. Speaker. There is no further comment. I can have a right of reply to that if you wish.
Roger, this is my meeting. I'm in the chair. I will say what I like, whether you like it or not. Thank you very much. But we will now move to the vote. Okay. All those in favour of the motion that this is not debated, please show. All those against, please show. Okay. 25-33-4. Roger, it will be debated. I did note before we go into the debate, Councillor Julian Dean, that you voted against us debating this. Does this mean that you've withdrawn your motion? All right, so you did want to, although you voted not to debate it, you now want to be part of the debate. All right.
We really want to discuss that, Chair?
Just
quite happy to discuss that, Chair, but
Yeah,
it doesn't seem to
okay.
be in order to
All
have
right.
that discussion.
No, okay, that's fine. Okay, so I believe that this is being proposed by Councillor Dan Morris. Councillor Morris.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can think of numerous occasions when somewhat spurious motions that may or may not have related to Shropshire Council have been brought by other members of the opposition parties. And I do wonder why the leader of the Liberal group now wishes not to debate this particular motion. Is it because he in some way supports potential illegal activity by stopping people from going around doing their normal work activities? This is a fairly simple motion. My colleague Richard Marshall brought it, but as I understand, he's a director of a haulage company. and he thinks he can't speak on it. So I kind of understand that. We're farmers, and I buy a lot of oil for our tractors. So I wonder if whether or not that makes me also. So anyway, it's a very, very simple motion. It basically says, let's act within the rule of law within our mutual goals and objectives of climate change. Shropshire Council has been very, very good in terms of its policies on climate change and net zero. But what we don't like is being interrupted and going about in our day-to-day activities. And I think it's perfectly prescient for the council to take a view on whether or not a legal activity should stop people from going about their day-to-day business. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Steve Davenport. Okay. Julian, your amendment.
Thank you very much. I'm bringing an amendment. So having the Tory group, having just voted down a vision to protect people from deaths on the road, are now bringing a motion to protect people from about half a dozen people sitting on the floor of Barclays Bank for about 20 minutes, during which time the bank remained open. That's the only example they've managed to actually put in this motion. And I'll just draw attention to one other piece of disruptive protest that I was involved in when I was about 8. In Bridgenorth. I grew up in Bridgenorth, and myself and my parents, including and many other children and parents, crossed the road by the bridge in Lowtown for about 15 minutes, disrupting the traffic. I'll admit it, I did it. And guess what? There is now crossing there, and that crossing is still there, and I'm very proud of that action. But my main concern with this motion actually is point one, is the ridiculous, frankly criminal, self-satisfied, complacent way in which it suggests that we are somehow leading the world. This council itself has struggled and continues to struggle to get anywhere near the decarbonisation of transport agenda that we support, because there is no money from government to support our bus strategy. We are failing to insulate the homes in our social housing as well as in our private housing, because the government is failing to come up with the cash and continually delays it, and also delays the building regulations which could make sure that new homes were also carbon zero. We have made no efforts to tackle land use and to do something about nature recovery so far. And most criminally, frankly, in the last month, your government has approved yet another coal mine, which will do nothing for the steel industry in this country, and which is essentially just a money-making exercise. So suddenly, the climate's important, except for when there's a profit involved. So the first paragraph is completely outrageous. So I wish to replace that by making those points that we are certainly not leading. The only other point I want to draw attention to, actually, in my amendment is under point 3, where you say, if I get this right, we recognise and understand the need to act on the environment, but believe the cooperation, blah, blah, blah. I love that but. It really does capture the mood and frankly, dinosaurs in the Tory party who see it all as a but. It should be an and. There is a huge opportunity here. There is a huge opportunity to actually improve people's lives by working together, to deal with fuel poverty, to deal with exclusion from transport, which we know is a huge concern actually to our business community, because they've made that clear that they want to see better public transport so people can get to work. We could do something about air quality. We could do something about a recovery of nature. It's an and. It's a win-win taking this action, whereas that sentence just really exposes the way that you don't get that. You don't get the huge opportunity that dealing with the climate could actually have for our community. So I move this amendment.
And it is seconded by Councillor Kerr. Right, it's the amendment. So Councillor Morris, you did indicate.
You see, I see what the Green Group are trying to do here. They're trying to drag this into a wider debate about Cumbrian coal mines and suffragettes in their motion. This is actually about law and order and debating in a democratic manner to achieve mutual goals. So I will not be supporting the amendment.
Right. Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, I mean, there are all sorts of criminal acts being undertaken probably every day in Shropshire, and you've chosen in your presenting this to focus on just one category of illegal activity as you see it. We have a proud history as a society, as a world, of recognising that demonstrations, resistance can lead to change. The suffragettes are mentioned, Montgomery bus protests, all of these caused disruption, huge disruption at the time, but history found they were in the right. And so therefore to focus just on these few protesters as a whole and to have a huge debate around that just demonstrates that you have a warped sense of priorities. You think this outweighs all the grievous crimes that are happening on a daily basis in Shropshire, and you could have focused on those, which are causing untold pain, injury and suffering to our people. But no, you just want to focus on those that might affect, as you see it, people who challenge perhaps some of the prerogatives that you enjoy. So I fully support the amendment. I think it highlights the discrepancy between our parties.
Thank you. Councillor Dean.
Thank you. No more comments. Thank you.
All right. We will move to the vote on the amendment. All of those who support the amendment, please show. I think we could have done that without counting that. All right. Those against, please show.
Up to you.
Okay, that's clearly the amendment has fallen. So we will move back to the original motion. Councillor Ashwood.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, let me put on record that I do not condone any acts of law breaking or criminality specifically, nor am I expressing support for any individual protests or campaign groups. But equally, I find it impossible to condemn across the board with no knowledge of context or reasoning every protest which might be classed as illegal under UK law. I am amazed that anyone would suggest such a bald statement be put to members for endorsement, unless the aim is simply to grab headlines by pandering to climate emergency deniers and the multinational companies and their shareholders which benefit financially from the status quo. Shropshire is hardly the epicentre of the climate movement. The movers of these resolutions seem to want to conflate, for purely political purposes, large protests which have happened in other parts of the country with the rather smaller, less disruptive actions we have seen by local groups. But what I really take issue with is the call to oppose all illegal protests by environmental groups, because the word illegal does not just mean violence, destruction of property, vandalism, etc. But increasingly, it is used to suppress anything this authoritarian Tory government want it to. They have just tightened the laws on protest considerably, which highlights that legality in this sense is a fairly arbitrary standard controlled by the government of the day. Indeed, ministers now have the right to change legal definitions at will without consulting Parliament, and have given the police much greater discretion to rule a protest illegal. These days, a protest simply has to be one person being noisy, and it can be declared illegal. The legislation and other recent measures was criticised by the UN's Special Rapporteur for Human Rights and the Environment because it shrinks the civic space and makes human rights violations more likely to occur and less likely to be sanctioned. Activities which were legal just 10 months ago are now arrestable offences. Illegality does not automatically equal immorality. Yes, suffragette protests were often illegal. Some civil rights protests in the US were illegal. Even the original Right to Roam protesters, the kinder trespassers of the 1930s, were breaking the law just walking up the Duke of Devonshire's hill. So many turning points which we today would not dream of reversing, rights, freedoms, the enacting of just laws and the abolition of unjust ones, they only happened due to disruptive or illegal protests, and protesters vilified in their own time are today held up as examples of heroes to our children. History is full of people who risked and lost their own freedom, even their lives, in order to progress society, despite often being in a minority. So a rather mindless blanket condemnation of the sort proposed is not only an unintelligent response to a complex and nuanced issue, it is historically illiterate and will, in my opinion, put this council on the wrong side of history. The police have enormous powers to stop illegal activity, and those powers were strengthened specifically in terms of protests in April this year. People breaking the law is a police matter. Would it not be more sensible to call on them to simply do more to enforce the law if Councillor Marshall and others find the effects of the protests intolerable? I could never imagine condoning every act which protesters commit in the name of their cause, either within or without the law. How could I without looking at each case on merit? And so neither can I condemn every action which might fall outside the scope of what this week's Home Secretary deems acceptable and calls the law. It is a ridiculous proposition and will achieve nothing, so I will not support this motion because to do so condemns too many of our heroes.
Thank you. Councillor Boddington. Yes, you're Councillor Boddington. As you're too busy clapping.
I very much concur with what has just been said, and you'll be pleased to know that it shortens what I'm going to say, because I'll just say
that
yes.
comes as good news to all of us.
Yes, exactly. I knew you'd welcome it. However, I don't see this motion is needed. I mean, it condemns illegal acts, but this is a law-abiding council. We're law-abiding councillors, I hope, and it really is a political motion. You know, obviously we don't as a council support illegal acts, goes without saying. I mean, I don't think we need to actually put that on paper. There's a danger that motions like this sour the atmosphere for protest. And as we've just heard, you get that sort of creep where more is restricted. There's a danger it's off-putting for protest. Protests can be disruptive. And they're not just green groups or left-wingers or whatever. In protests, I mean, I recall a leading Conservative leading a protest march through Ludlow that jammed the town for more than an hour. That person was Philip Dunn, currently my MP. And there are times when you need to disrupt. Now, that wasn't illegal. I'm not saying it was, but it is this danger of creep. And this is an urgent issue. You know, outside this room, the world's on fire, or it's melting, or it's flooding. And people are dying as a result of it, losing their livelihoods as a result. And it is urgent. We need to tackle it urgently. I don't support illegal protests, but I do support protests which are sometimes obstructive, because that's the way to get your message across. Thank you.
Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just to put the record right, I will be abstaining on this. I do not think it is relevant business for this council. Totally a waste of time making political points to government or others. This council is about doing things, I thought. This does not do anything for the residents of Shropshire. But full residents, I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I am speaking on the thing.
I know you are, Roger, but you are remaking
motion.
the point that you made at the beginning of the debate by entering into the debate that you didn't want to have. But by all means, carry on. I'm confused.
Mr. Speaker, I'm referring to the motion, and I think I have 5 minutes or 4 minutes to actually speak. And I am relevant to the motion that is now being debated, not to any amendments or any previous motions. So I am abstaining, and I note what was said after I spoke at the last time by the proposer of the motion. Totally disagree, and he does not know me as he thinks he does. I am a Democrat. I believe in demonstrations. If we look back in history at demonstrations, they have affected the way people do things. They have affected our country now. Demonstrations are needed at certain times, but this motion, irrelevant, irresponsible, not needed. I am abstaining. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. Okay, Steve Davenport, you seconded at the beginning. Councillor Davenport, if you'd like to join the meeting and stop talking to your neighbour, that would be useful. You withheld your right. Do you wish to speak? Good. It is a confusing day. Councillor Morris.
I'm not in favour of illegal activity, but there's that word "but" again that Julian Dean so kindly mentioned earlier on in his amendment. The motion's very simple. It's 2 lines. It's 2 points. Condemn all legal protests and work constructively with democratic bodies. I don't see any problem with voting for that, and I move the motion.
Okay. Well, we are on the original motion. It has had a reasonably good debate. All those in favour of supporting, please show. Yes. Okay. No, there's enough of you. Sit. Okay. I'm not sure who'll benefit most from a recorded vote, but there we go. Chief Executive.
Roy Allcroft.
For.
Jeff Anderson. For. Caroline Bagnall. Nicholas Bardsley. Joyce Barrow. Bernie Bentinck.
Abstain.
Thomas Biggins. Edward Bird. Andy Boddington. Peter Broomhall. Julia Buckley.
Abstain.
Gary Birchett. Gwilym Butler. Dean Carroll. Steve Charmley. Rachel Connolly. Rosemary Dartnell. Steve Davenport. Mary Davis. Julian Dean. Jeff Elner. David Evans. Julia Evans. Roger Evans.
Abstain.
Paul Gill. Nat Green. Kate Halliday. Simon Harris. Nigel Hartin. Nick Hignett. Ruth Houghton. Richard Huffer. Tracy Huffer. Vince Hunt.
For.
Kirsty Hurst Knight. Mike Isherwood. Mark Jones. Simon Jones. Duncan Kerr. Heather Kidd. Christian Lee. Hilary Luff. Nigel Lumby. Elliot Lynch. Robert Macy. Richard Marshall. Dan Morris. Pam Mosley.
Abstain.
Alan Mosley. Did you say absent? I'm sorry. Thank you. Cecilia Motley. Peggy Mullock. Ian Nellins. Kevin Pardy. Viv Parry. Tony Parsons. Leslie Picton. Ed Potter. Chris Schofield. Dan Thomas. Edward Towers. David Vasmer. Alex Wagner. Claire Wild. Brian Williams.
For.
Rob Wilson. Paul Wynne. Thank you.
Just so members know, before we get it back, when we have recorded this vote, given our progress through the motions, I am going to call a 20-minute break to allow people to use the facilities, refresh themselves, have something to eat if they need it. I will give you the exact time of being back in here to start again, and we will be starting at that time. So please do try and make sure you are back in here. And if we can just wait for a minute before we disappear, unless you're absolutely desperate, in which case, Bazoon, we'll get the results of the vote. "20 minutes, Roger, as I said at the beginning. No, 20 minutes. I might even be generous and make it 22. Score?
34.
34 for,
7 against.
and 20 abstentions. So that motion has passed. Okay, members, we will reconvene in this chamber at 20 to 1. Thank you. from Councillor David Vasmer and is supported by the Liberal Democrat group. Councillor Vasmer.
Thank you, Chair. If anyone wanted an illustration of the Central Park Radio Shropshire plays in the life of our county, you must listen to yesterday evening's broadcast of Carols in the Square, introduced by Adam Green and Claire Ashford, which is still available on BBC Sounds. Before the pandemic, this was for many people a Christmas highlight, and last night a packed Market Square in Shrewsbury saw its return to full health in bitterly cold conditions, with some rousing singing accompanied by Shrewsbury's brass band. And if you were there in the square or listened on Radio Shropshire, you will know that the messages were read out from people all over Shropshire, the rest of the UK and overseas. Radio Shropshire is a vital part of our community. It gives voice to debates in the county and gives those who now live outside the county a window on what is happening here. The motion today has been prompted by the BBC's decision to cut local programming on local radio stations in favour of more digital content. Local shows will only survive on weekday mornings and lunchtimes, that's from 6 a.m. to 2 p.m. The rest of the output, apart from evening and weekend sport, will be shared either regionally or nationally. It is strange that the BBC has decided to make these cuts because over the last 3 years of floods, coronavirus and the maternity scandal, Radio Shropshire has proved its worth many times over. It has broadcast important local information which may change hour by hour, and some heart-rending local stories that demand your attention. Broadcasts like this help to strengthen our identity as a county and keep everyone informed, particularly the elderly and those living in rural areas who may not always be able to access the internet. I'm hoping this motion will not generate the metaphorical hot air that comes with other motions we've seen today, but we can agree on the need for more real hot air, and you will support this motion. We must make sure that the BBC bosses in London are aware of how important BBC Radio Shropshire is to the life of our county and the vital role that local programming plays in maintaining that position. I must end by quoting our council leader on this occasion in support. She said recently, "A strong local radio station plays a vital role in our communities and our local democracy, helping to bring people together. I urge the BBC to think again on the proposals that I fear would seep away part of our lifeblood of our county." I urge you to support this motion.
Thank you. Now, who's that being seconded by? Heather Kidd. You're going to reserve your right?
I will reserve my right.
Okay, and I've got Councillor Tony Parsons.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'd like to strongly support this motion. Not only Radio Shropshire, but all of the other 30 or 40 local radio stations around the country provide an excellent service to their local population. The fact that that service will conclude at 2 o'clock in future rather than at 7 o'clock will be a significant loss to residents both in Shropshire and around the country. We're told at the moment with this reduction that it will not affect local sport, such as commentary of Shrewsbury Town's football matches, whether they be in the evening or on a Saturday. But that might be the way that the thing is rolling. You know, if these cuts get through, the next one might be on local sport, and instead of listening to Fleetwood Town against Shrewsbury on a Tuesday night, we might only have Liverpool v Man United on Radio 5 Live. So let's make sure that we preserve the current situation with regards to local radio coverage. I support this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Leslie Picton, then Councillor Andy Boddington.
Yeah, thank you,
Leslie.
Mr. Chairman. David, you were doing so well, Councillor Vasmer, sorry, rather than David. You were doing so well in paragraphs 1 to 6. I'm very grateful that you read out my quote where I said how much I value and how much the Conservative group value BBC Radio Shropshire. As Councillor Parsons said, this doesn't just affect Radio Shropshire, it affects every single local radio station in the country. I have been assured by the email I have back from the Director General that it doesn't affect local events such as Carols in the Square. It will also not affect local sport, but I take your point, Councillor Parsons. Who knows what the next stage may be. However, I have written, as I said, to the Director General. I've already made for some very, very public statements regarding this. But in all honesty, Councillor Vasma, you can't really expect me to support a motion that is so critical of my own government. So unfortunately, I won't be supporting it. However, Radio Shropshire know that they have my absolute backing and everything that we can possibly do. But I'm not willing to support a motion that is so critical of my own government. Thank you very much.
Okay, Councillor Andy Boddington.
Thank you. I'm rather disappointed with that response. That some of the very long-standing members will remember a meeting of Cabinet, which was, I think, a decade ago, might have been 11 years ago, in the last round of local radio cuts. And I was invited along, I wasn't then a councillor, by the then leader, Keith Barrow, which shows how long ago it was, invited along to speak, along with a number of other people, about how valuable local radio was. And this council then, unanimously is what I'm looking for, unanimously backed supporting local radio and opposing the cuts. And in fact, the campaign was very successful. That we got them reduced by nearly half, the cuts reduced by nearly half. And local radio survived. In this proposal, there is something that looks very good on paper initially, like creating larger news teams, but in reality, the 11 news teams across the country are sort of sub-regional teams, and they're not really local. So there's been no decision where the reporters hub will be based. Obviously, reporters will be out across the whole area, but there seems little doubt that, I mean, because the reporters serving Shropshire will also serve Coventry, there seems little doubt that the base will be in Coventry. And that's certainly, you know, the chatter in the BBC. So what we are losing easily, because you can't get a Shropshire perspective if you live in Coventry. It's just not possible. Complete different places. Nothing wrong with Coventry, but it's a complete different place. So I think that is worrying and really doesn't advance local news, despite what is said by the BBC. So, you know, I thoroughly support this motion and that we should all support it and support BBC Radio Shropshire.
Councillor Julia Buckley.
Thank you. I think that we all support the intention of this motion, which is to appeal to the decision makers to reconsider the cuts. And I think we need to understand the difficult position that Councillor Picton has been put in, given some of the wording in the motion. So I'd like to ask the leader, would you please consider a friendly amendment that would remove the critical wording? I'd like to propose that we remove paragraph 7 that reads, Council recognises the BBC is being forced into cuts by successive government freezes to the licence fee and the withdrawal of funding for free licences for over 75. So that would be removed, that criticism. And perhaps the other word which might cause you discomfort is in paragraph 9, asking that we write to the Secretary of State, but perhaps instead of expressing dismay, you could express your concern. So what I'm asking really is that you set aside your political disagreements with Councillor Vasma and that we find a way forward so that what is written will help the people of Shropshire and the radio of Shropshire. I hope you recognise I'm putting aside my political views. I'm leaving them very much at the door because I think the outcome is more important on this occasion.
Okay, just to exercise my brain so quickly after lunch. Obviously, that would have to be taken on board by the original proposer, but I'm going to look at Councillor Picton.
I can do a little bit of divvying with that. And I absolutely agree with Councillor Buckley. You know, we talked about this as a group. We all support BBC Radio Shropshire, but I am not willing to be that critical. So thank you, Councillor Buckley, for saying that. There are some words in there. So I would be happy with paragraphs 1, 2, 6, if Councillor Vasma is. Remove paragraph 7. Remove paragraph 8, actually, because One of the things perhaps people don't understand is that this is a decision by the BBC to invest significant monies in digital services, which is not what the public consultation has come about. So it's partly up to the BBC how they deliver this. So be happy with 1 to 6, remove 7 and 8. Can I suggest that at the bottom where it says the council instructs the chief exec, that you instruct perhaps the leader to write to the Secretary of State and the chief exec to write to the Director General? Yes? Marvellous. See, democracy at its best. There you go.
Yes.
You've got that, Chair.
Yeah. Yeah, well, no, believe it or not, I actually have, yes. So we're changing who's writing to who and removing paragraphs 7 and 8. I can see David Vasmer, who proposed it, shaking his head in agreement. Councillor Buckley is leaving politics at the door to help this. So what I'm going to do
I'm in agreement with that, Chair, with those amendments.
I was going to come to you in a minute, Heather. Don't worry, I wasn't going to leave you out. You're on your phone. I thought you were busy. All right. Okay. So I think what we probably need for clarity for members, David, is taking that in mind. Would you like to read out the new motion? I'm not going to take it as a formal amendment because we could be here all day if we do that. It's an alteration, which if everybody's happy to take on board, subject to the words that David says.
9. Paragraph 9's out.
Can I suggest, Chair, just that we're removing, I think it's paragraphs that begin with council calls on government. Hang on, council, I'm trying to do myself now.
I just think we need to be clear on what we're voting on.
No, I suppose there's no chance we can put it on the screen so that we can.
No, probably not. I can't see it anyway. It's behind me, and it is pantomime season, I know, so I wouldn't want people shouting that.
Hang on, wait a minute.
Because they'd be right.
Yeah,
I think we're looking at 7, 8, and 9, aren't we? Taking out and a swap round of who's writing to who.
It's council recognises this coming out, and the sentence beginning, section beginning, council recognises that council calls, that one as well, and then as you say, we're swapping around with the request. So it's requested that the leader writes to the Director General.
Yeah.
And take out dismay and make it concern.
Yep, and take out dismay.
I'm not really keen on the word demand.
Right, fine, take out demand.
Good Lord, is there anything left? Okay. Councillor Wilde, I do have a couple of other people that wish to speak. I was hoping that with full agreement of everybody, we'd close this down. If I'm going to bring you in, by right, I should bring them in first. Do you really need to speak? Because if so, you'll be third on my list. Right. Okay. Brilliant. Councillor Viv Parry, while
I agree with everything that's been said, and I think if we agree on what you've just agreed on, that will be fine. But I'd like to bring up how much Radio Shropshire has done for this council. Some of the how should I say, the commentators that come on have come to different meetings and held those meetings and kept them going for us over the years, especially when I was on county. I remember how people, it was well organised when they were doing it. And it was always a pleasure I used to work actually for Radio Shropshire, I really should have said that, years ago with my ex-husband. And we used to go around the county doing all sorts of talks to different people. And it was something that I really enjoyed. I remember coming in one day actually, and Dean Carroll saying to me, "Have you listened to Radio Shropshire this morning?" And I said, "No, I don't listen to Radio Shropshire. I listen to Radio 2, which I did this morning." And he said, "Oh, you must, that's terrible. You must listen to Radio Shropshire." And since then, I've listened to Radio Shropshire. So thank you very much for that.
All right. Good.
It's all right.
There is
such good programmes and such good speakers that you need to listen to.
All right. I don't
But there
think,
we are.
I
That's
think
just
probably
my
the
view.
comments
I agree with
that you've
everybody
made, Viv, are well made, and I don't think there's anybody in this room that would disagree with any of that. Councillor Roger Evans, then Councillor Claire Wild. Then hopefully, I'm hoping we'll be in a position then to move forward with the vote.
Yeah. Can I move that amendment then, or Julia can, and I'll second one of the two?
You can in a minute, but I'm going to bring, because Claire wished to speak.
Oh, okay, I'm
so I'm
sorry.
going to bring in everybody else who wished to first. Roger Evans. Good. Oh, I thought you'd finished.
Yeah.
I was hopeful.
Support the original motion and also support what is now being suggested. But I wanted to put one anecdote there. I was disappointed that we've had to do this in order to get the council. It's good the council is operating as a council in support of Radio Shropshire. But one of my first introductions was with a Conservative government down in Parliament, taking part in a march from the square to the Guildhall, cross-party, Conservatives, Labour, Liberal Democrats, with a coffin, because that's what we thought was happening to Shropshire with the funding and the things that government were doing to Shropshire, a Conservative government. And we went down to Downing Street and marched in Downing Street with a coffin up to the gates in,
All right,
in
Roger,
Downing
I think
Street.
this is becoming a little bit political, and I think we're trying to keep politics out of it now.
I'm sorry, it is relevant to this.
Well, if you want to express an anecdote about how you've worked with Radio Shropshire, that's fine. But marches down to London carrying coffins with Conservative governments is beginning to politicise something that I thought we were getting a cross-table vision together about how we can support Radio Shropshire without being political. However,
I'm supporting this, Mr. Speaker. The suggestions that go forward, but I'm saying this council does need to operate together. But okay, I will go with what is being suggested. Yep. But councils in the past have criticised whatever flavour is in Downing Street on behalf of the residents of Shropshire. But I support what is now being put forward.
Brilliant. Thank you. Councillor Wilde.
Okay. Oh, I have got a mic. I absolutely support Radio Shropshire, but I take such a dim view of the Liberals politicising something that's so important. And I pay tribute to Labour and the Conservative group for actually taking the politics out of that. And if the Conservatives and Labour group are going to move an amendment, I think that would be the best idea, because I think we absolutely have to turn our backs on politicising something that is so important. Thank you.
Councillor Dean, and then I'm going to call it quits and go back to Councillors Picton and Vasmer to hash together what they. I will bring you in when they've said what you're actually seconding, if that's all right, because there's been an agreed change, so you don't exactly know, as I don't, what you're seconding at the moment. Okay.
I will go along with this, but I fail to see how stripping out criticism of the government is not political. Seems to me to be an entirely political thing to have done.
Yeah, okay. Moving on. Okay. Councillors Picton and Vasmer, have you come up with a wording that we can then vote on, please?
I'm typing as fast as I can. So, Councillor Vasmer, if you're willing for me to just read this out, and forgive me if I've missed up bits here. I'm trying to do this on the hoof. So paragraphs 1 to 6, down to where it says former Prime Minister Liz Truss is fine. Remove the next paragraph, which is council recognises. Remove the next paragraph, which says council calls on. And then council asks, or instructs, I'm not that bothered about that. Council asks the leader to write to the Secretary of State to express our concern at these proposed cuts to BBC local radio, and to ask that the government find a solution. Ask that the government work with the BBC to find a solution to cover the predicted shortfall, and that council further requests that the chief exec write to the Director General to celebrate the irreplaceable, and that's absolutely fine. All right with that, guys? Yeah, good. Fine.
Okay, so Heather, you seconded in the first place. Now you know exactly what you're seconding. Would you like to say a few words, as you reserved your right?
I thought that's what I was seconding. Exactly.
I just wanted to make sure, so there could be no doubt in anybody's mind.
Absolutely. I can understand the leader of council's disquiet with actually criticising her own government. I must say that I still am critical of her own government.
And that's fine.
Because actually a lot of this is being caused by the pensioners who get free TV licenses having to now be funded by the BBC rather than by central government. So that's my bit to say on why that should have been there in many respects. But the most important thing for this motion is that actually we have a joint approach to this, that it is cross-party and that it's made absolutely clear in communications with government that it is cross-party and how much we value Radio Shropshire. We in the rural areas would frequently not know when schools were closed, when snow has hit, when all sorts of other things happen, when roads are closed because there's been an RTA. And Radio Shropshire reports all of that in a way that actually nobody else can. And I can't see that anybody based in Coventry or wherever they decide on is going to be able to have that same insight and have the same measure of debate with the Shropshire public that they do now, and they do have a real feel for Radio Shropshire and Shropshire's residents. And that is why I'm supporting this. Not that I have reviewed my criticism of the government, I have not, but I do support that this is the most important thing for the residents of Shropshire, and therefore we should all vote for it.
Thank you. Councillor David Vasmer, you have the right of reply on what's been quite confusing, so good luck.
Well, I think it's been cleared up by the leader, Chair, and I think I'm very much supportive of the amended motion. I obviously that there are things I regret about the government's actions, but the important thing now is to make sure that representations are made to the BBC to protect the local programming of Radio Shropshire, which is so important to all of us. So I support this motion. I hope everybody else will be able to do so as well.
Okay, well, we will move to the vote, but just before we do, is there anybody unclear about what we're doing, what we're supporting? No, excellent. All those in favour, please show. And I think that's unanimous. Good. Thank you. Long may that cross-party working continue. And I suspect probably not. Okay. So we'll move on to the fourth motion, which has been received from Councillor Julia Evans and is supported by the Green Group. Julia.
I'd just like to say that it is actually seconded by Councillor Bentic. I brought this motion because we had a meeting in Radbrook for road safety on the 25th of November, and three of the ambulance service hierarchy came. And when we mentioned the problems we have where the hub is now, and I think everybody's in agreement, the hub is in the wrong place. The ambulances go flying past 2 secondary schools and 1 primary school in Radbrook. And this has caused a lot of difficulty, not only because people driving along the roads there when school drop off and pick up times, when they see a blue light coming up behind, cars are seen to be mounting pavements where pupils are trying to walk to school. And we're trying to, especially the Priory, are trying to encourage active travel. And a lot of children are being put off, and a lot of parents don't want their children to be put in harm's way. The other thing is obviously drop off and pick up time. There's a lot of traffic, a lot of parking where they shouldn't, and ambulances trying to get through. We're trying to get Bank Farm Road speed reduction implementation there, and we can't because that is the main route that the ambulances use. So when we discussed this with the West Midlands Ambulance Service officers who came, they are desperate to move, but they have said the ambulance hub will take 5 years, and we need to work as a team with the council to get this hub moved. So I'm proposing that we work towards a new site and assist with them at all speed. Thank you. Okay.
And obviously that's been seconded by Councillor Bentic. Are you withholding your right?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, reserving it. I believe there is an amendment on this. Councillor Picton.
There is, but it's tiny, and Julia has agreed to it. It is literally just some wording. We felt it was important to ensure that it wasn't just looking at our own assets, but to look at other assets that are owned in the one public estate. And I also took the liberty again, and I've explained to Councillor Evans why that we've taken the line out about the schools, because we have no direct involvement in that sense. But we're quite happy in item number 4 to ask the comms team to work with West Midlands Ambulance Service so that people understand the highway code matters around. So Councillor Evans has agreed that amendment. I believe my colleague Councillor Carroll is going to second that amendment.
Right. Well, if you're accepting the amendment, which it seemed
I do.
you were, Councillor Bentinck.
I'm seconding that. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to take it as an amendment then. It's similar to the previous one. It's a change for the original. Is there anybody that doesn't understand now what we're voting on? No. So all those in favour, please show.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a right of.
All right. Yes. Okay. Please don't. It was going to be unanimous, I think. Please don't say anything that will change that. All right. Go on then.
Debating?
Okay. There's a few hands that I didn't see. I apologise. So.
Are we not going to discuss this? No.
I've just said, yeah, I didn't see a couple of hands. When I looked round, I didn't see your hand, Councillor Pardee. No, that's all right. Go on then.
You said you had other hands.
But I thought you had when you put it out.
They'd have been before me. If this council had been strong enough some years ago when the application went in for a depot and maintenance building, if you wish, this would not occur. And Councillor Nick Lawrence fought for a long time to ensure that it wasn't used as an ambulance station. So really and honestly, we should clamp down on this sort of thing, or else we wouldn't have these sort of problems arising. And in particular, Nick Lawrence was really worried about ambulances speeding past schools. So in retrospect, it should never have happened.
Okay, Councillor Vasmer.
Thank you, Chair. I would like to, in the spirit of cooperation engendered by the last debate, I'd like to ask that I think Councillor Picton and also I think our Chief Executive Andy Begley are members of the ICB board. One of the problems the ambulance service have got is they no longer have a capital programme. That capital programme is now being taken over by the ICB, and therefore they had to go to the ICB to get capital funding to move into a new depot. So I'd call upon our representatives on the ICB board to endeavour to get support for the ambulance services bid to move their depot to a much better location.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, I just
Sorry,
like
you've moved
to-
seats around, so I'm looking at my names list here and can't find them all. So.
Yes, I'm not Ted Clark. I'm Kate.
No. Yes.
I'd just like to support this motion. I think that certainly, I don't think anyone thinks this ambulance hub is in the right place. Its remit seems to have morphed recently. Certainly living in one of the wards where the ambulances come up and down, it's really not great. There's lots of schools around. I think I would support Councillor Vasmer's comments there about we do have an increased remit to work actually on the ICB now, and I think the more pressure that we can apply to have this happen as soon as possible, the better, because there are regular accidents and problems in this area with young children.
Councillor Dean Carroll.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, a dialogue's already begun between the estates directors at West Midlands Ambulance Service and with council officers about the prospect for relocating the ambulance station, or ambulance depot, I think we're supposed to call it, on Longdon Road. And that is being done through the One Public Estate programme, which is led by Shropshire Council. We're looking for a site for a new ambulance hub in Shrewsbury when the current lease expires in 2027. And this includes a review of all Shropshire Council-owned sites and sites in the ownership of other public sector bodies, as it's under the work of the One Public Estate programme. In answer possibly to Councillor Evans' point in introducing the motion about why the ambulance trust said that it would take them 5 years to relocate, I assume that that's because their current lease expires in 2027, in which case they're bound into that unless they choose to take a decision to novate or vacate that lease. But I couldn't see a reason why it couldn't be brought forward on a purely buildings point of view in a time shorter than 5 years if both the property and the funding were there. But as I've said, Shropshire Council is already engaged with West Midlands Ambulance Service in trying to find a new location, and it is using all the estate resources of the public sector in Shrewsbury to seek a new location.
Okay, I haven't got anybody else on my list, so Councillor Bentinck. And then if you remember, just don't switch it on because you'll be switching it off if you switch it on because you left it on. So, but do switch it off when you're finished if you follow that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for that advice. Mr. Chairman, the roads approaching the 3 meal schools have been designated an accident black spot by Shropshire Council, including Longdon Road, on which the West Midlands Ambulance Services, Service ambulances emerged from Mercy and Close at a rate of 2 to 3 per hour, according to local residents. Indeed, West Midlands Ambulance Service statistics obtained by a Freedom of Information request indicate that there are almost 13,000 dispatches from the meal operational base per year, both before and during the years of the pandemic. Only last week, a woman in her 60s was involved in a collision on Longdon Road, resulting in a head injury, for which she spent 6 hours in Royal Shrewsbury Hospital's Accident and Emergency Department, and then a week off work. Numerous near misses involving ambulances have been reported on Longdon Road by local residents. And additionally, the residents of Longdon Road and Sweet Lake Meadow have complained of both noise and light pollution from the ambulances, recognising that they do a vital job. There are on average 3 collisions on the roads approaching the 3 meal schools, which serve 2,800 students and children every school term. A recent survey of the Westmeal residents, which includes Longdon Road and the surrounding roads, found a 2/3 majority of residents supporting relocation of the ambulance hub from Mercy and Close. People sometimes act impulsively on our roads and can put their lives and health at risk. And so I strongly support any education on road usage for our young people and indeed other road users. My local colleagues, the Meal Traffic Group, Radbrook Safety Group, and Meal and Radbrook residents enthusiastically welcome the West Midlands Ambulance Service decision to relocate their hub from Mercy and Close in Meal. However, we are dismayed that their timescale, which was stated at the last Radbrook Safety Group meeting on the 25th of November, is 3 to 5 years. And this is not soon enough. Mr. Chairman, this is an urgent issue and demands urgent resolution. Accordingly, I strongly support this motion, and I ask Shropshire Council to facilitate the move within 2023/24 by, as Councillor Carroll has been saying, offering a site owned by the council or to facilitate the use of land for which the council is in partnership. Perhaps the one at Weeping Cross, which has been previously mentioned. And so, Mr. Chairman, I enthusiastically support and second this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure necessarily that's what the portfolio holder, Dean Carroll, said about. Dean, can you, unusual, but as I say, my meeting, Dean, can you just clarify that?
As a
Because
point
I'm not
of,
sure that's what I
as a
heard
point of
from you.
explanation, you're correct, Chairman. I didn't say that we would give a site. I said that we would work within the one public estate and look at all sites within council and public ownership in Shrewsbury to find a site that would be suitable.
All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My main point was that it should be in 2023-24 because this is an urgent issue. People are being injured week by week, and we don't want to have a death.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. I'll let you have that little comeback then. Can you switch your mic off now? Thank you. Okay, back to the original proposer. I think we almost took a vote before I brought people in to speak, but I don't think there was much of a debate. Just I'm hoping it'll still be unanimous, and there we go. Councillor Junior Evans.
Yeah, it was just to say that the 5 years was from the last project that the West Midlands Ambulance Service took to move to a new hub. So that was their wording, not mine.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, does everybody know what they are now voting on, which is not an amended but a changed, which was proposed by Councillor Julie Evans and seconded by Councillor Bernie Bentinck. So, all those in favour, please show. Any against? Abstentions? Unanimous. Thank you, councillors. Good. We will move on. Open my page. So now we move on to item 16, which is questions from members. We've had a few questions in. I would remind members that I will ask them if they have a supplementary question. I would appreciate it if that was not a rehash of the original question or not an attempt to make a statement, political or otherwise. And I've also, so that members know, have accepted an emergency question from Councillor Nat Green. However, we will take the other questions first, and I will bring Nat Green in to ask that question shortly. So, Councillor Maurice Davenport, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, we do.
Okay, I don't know what it is, so you'll have to enlighten us.
Could I thank Councillor Marshall, my neighbour, for his reply? If the chair will indulge me for a few seconds, I'd like to encourage all members of the council to pay a visit to Theatre 7 to watch the pantomime Beauty and the Beast. Plenty of slapstick humour, plenty, and a character called Philippe Flop, or Flip Flop. It strikes me that the words pantomime, slapstick and flip-flop strike a particular chord with the Shropshire Liberal Democrat Group's policy to building bypasses. Are they in favour or not in favour? In Shrewsbury, it appears. Oh no, they're not.
Can I just ask members
oh yes, they are.
that it is to be a supplementary question on from the answer that has been provided,
of course,
and not a flip flop of a question about some pantomime.
What a pantomime! Anyway, so at the last community overview scrutiny meeting, the chair of Shropshire Chamber of Commerce stated that a majority of the members of the Shropshire Chamber of Commerce support the North West Relief Road. Would the portfolio holder for highways and his cabinet colleagues commit to talking with businesses in Shropshire to help publicly extol the benefits to the Shropshire economy of the North West Relief Road and help counter the voices of the vocal minority? Thank you.
Is the portfolio going to answer that now, or get back to him? Or just whisper it to him quietly? I'm sure other members would like to hear it.
I'm going to say, he's sitting next to me. I'll answer it now if I may, Chair. And I'm not going to break into any pantomime stuff, don't worry.
No.
Both myself, the council and the cabinet are fully committed to building the North West Relief Road. We're still behind that, and we all do see the benefits, as in the original answer. And we are actively talking with businesses in the local area to talk about the benefits for them and the benefits that they see within the building of the North West Relief Road.
Okay. Next one, Councillor Dean, do you have a supplementary question?
I do. Thank you very much. So this question was regarding energy efficiency measures and renewable energy in the council-owned shopping centre. And I note that the answer is somewhat disappointing in terms of this being a strategic asset where we really should be leading the way. So my supplementary question is, can we please investigate, can I ask the portfolio holder to investigate the use of green leases from now on, which are beginning to be used? Green leases would allow for performance-based energy ratings rather than just the type we have at the moment, which are not very effective, the type actually which public buildings already use. They would allow for the collection and analysis of tenant and energy consumption and measures to try and reduce that. They would allow for procurement of 100% green energy for tenants, so a collective procurement agreement to ensure that energy is 100%. They would allow for waste reduction strategies, which we already wish to see, but they could be in the leases. And they would allow for providing opportunities for training and knowledge sharing within the businesses within the shopping centre. So I would ask for an investigation into the use of green leases in our shopping centre. Thank you.
Okay, and I'm not, portfolio holder, do you wish to say anything on that? I think it's just a request that you do that.
I think the original question was at Councillor Nellins, but the supplementary seemed aimed more at me than Councillor Nellins. Obviously, we'll consider the points you raise, Councillor Dean, but I can't give you a definitive commitment to that until we've looked at the full implications of the kind of leases you suggest.
Okay, good, thank you. Councillor Isherwood, do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, Chair. Firstly, thank you to Councillor Dean Carroll for his detailed reply to my initial question. I think it highlights how hard Star Housing work for their tenants. I've always been impressed with the team there. They seem to be an exemplary provider of housing, especially within my own division, where there are a very high number of Star tenants. But reports from Ludlow do highlight a bit of a tip of an iceberg of problems with black mould in social housing, with 12 properties having it with just one single provider. So obviously not all tenants are lucky enough to be Star Housing tenants. So I'd just like to ask, what is Shropshire Council doing directly or through Star Housing to support other housing providers to achieve similar standards to our own?
Is that something you wish to answer now?
I can answer partially now. Firstly, thank you, Councillor Isherwood, for your comments about Star Housing. We are very proud of their operations as our arm's length management organisation. Hence why we extended their lease, their management agreement earlier this year. We do actively work with all registered social landlords in Shropshire. I believe there are over 30 currently operating, but there's 4 principal ones. I believe I may know the one that you're referring to in this supplementary question. I can't go into the specific details in this setting about those individual cases, but we do, through the Social Housing Forum, take up issues including property conditions with all the registered social landlords operating within Shropshire. However, on the back of your question, I will again make sure that we have a conversation with this RSL in particular about these properties. It's not something we could do through Star because they're purely there as a management organisation, but through our housing functions and potentially through our environmental health functions, that's something that we can have dialogue with them on. Sorry, I can't go into more detail about properties, but that's...
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wilson, do you have a supplementary
question? Thank you very much. My question is about disaggregating the amount of highway that's been resurfaced in Shropshire since May 2021, and instead of looking at the highway together, looking at the carriageway, the footway and the cycleway, and Councillor Marshall very helpfully replied with that. I actually happened to be in the same community overview meeting as Councillor Morris, where the same chair of the Chamber of Commerce said that they have a lot of businesses who are willing to take on young people as apprentices, but they can't because those young people can't get there because they don't have cars, can't afford cars, and can't get to and from place of work. So I know the Place Overview Committee has asked that in future council reports disaggregate the highway into carriageway, footway and cycleway, and I was hoping that Councillor Marshall would support that request from the Place Overview Committee.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you for the question, the supplementary one. I'll certainly have a look at it with you. I think it's important to point out when you're asking about resurfacing, the highways will always look at risk and they'll prioritise to risk. And when we look at it in its entirety, in 21-22, there were 326 claims against highways, 5 against footpaths and 2 against cycleways that came in. So therefore, our priorities will always go to the larger number where there is more of a risk. And that is where that's why you can see the figures have increased so much on highway resurfacing as opposed to footway and cycleway. But we'll certainly look at that for you.
Thank you. Councillor Green, do you have a supplementary question? Well, you need to put your question first, don't you?
Yeah, thank you.
So, Councillor Nat Green.
Yes, well, my question is, following the incident at the Lion Hotel on the 8th of December, it was clear that serious issues arose regarding the welfare of evacuated residents and businesses. I understand that Shropshire Council officers involved in the operation are undertaking a debriefing. Could councillors be told when that report will be produced, and could it be made available to all members at the earliest opportunity?
I'm afraid I wasn't given pre-notice of this.
Richard Marshall comes under me, Chair. Okay. As part of the multi-agency response to the incident, the council's emergency planning team, on-call officers and volunteers implemented its rest centre plan, together with transportation to aid members of the public. The aim of a rest centre is to care for evacuees who need temporary accommodation or shelter due to an incident or emergency. In addition to the council's official allocated rest centres, some local businesses, organisations voluntarily provided locations for dispersed members of the public to shelter whilst the incident was ongoing. And I would like to extend my appreciation for their actions during the cold evening. Shropshire Council staff responded very quickly to the incident and worked through until midnight across formal and informal rest centres and sites to assess the needs of the dispersed public. It is very important that local members give officers space and allow them to conduct their duties unabated when a live incident is happening. Even though as members we like to be kept informed, it is more important for the officers to deal with the immediate incident as opposed to us in that first incident. The cordon was lifted by the police at around midnight when the police were satisfied the area was safe and when all members of public affected had vacated the rest centres and other sites. I would like to personally thank all the Shropshire Council staff who responded to the incident, dropping many of their own plans they had in place that evening and going, as I believe, above and beyond their day-to-day duties. They responded professionally and worked in a calm manner in what was an extremely stressful and evolving situation. The resilience of the council and our community was truly demonstrated that evening. As with all emergency incidents, reviews are undertaken to help improve plans and preparedness for future events. And I will be liaising with the emergency planning team in due course to understand learning outcomes from the event with regard to future rest centre exercises. However, I must stress that some information contained within emergency plans and information gathered from a debriefing is sensitive and will not be made publicly available, as this information could prejudice future operations.
Do you have a supplementary question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. In the light of the fact that some residents were escorted to police lines and then left for 3.5 hours in the sub-zero temperatures, and only through, and I fully agree with Councillor Marshall when he talks about members of officers going above and beyond their duty, in that a particular officer actually had to go and locate this couple who had been left stranded and take them to a place of safety. And then upon discovering that this couple had also asked of the police, where is your control centre, to be told there isn't one, and to have to face the wrath of the owner of a local hotel, and it wasn't the Lion Hotel, who found herself, her staff and her residents again escorted to the lines where they were told that the place of safety was the Wakeman School. Turned out to be not true, and indeed they had to use the local premises, which is the Peachtree. And I'd also like to extend my full gratitude towards staff and management of the Peachtree for going above and beyond what was expected of them. Clearly, there has been a breakdown between the police and also Shropshire Council. I actually fully support the actions of Shropshire Council staff. Those that I saw in action were doing as much as they possibly could, and I have no criticism of them whatsoever. But my question is, and if Councillor Marshall had actually read my earlier question, I didn't ask for a public statement. I asked for this to be made available to councillors, that when, and hopefully by next council, this report is done, can it be made available to councillors at the next council, if necessarily under exempt items? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I think it's fair to say whenever we've got a situation that involves multiple agencies coming together in an emergency, there's always going to be situations that do, if you like, slip through the net and things could be done better. That's the whole purpose, and to have a debrief and we can all learn and how we can work better together. I think overall the operation with all of the agencies was an exemplary piece of work. And as I said previously, and you said yourself, the local businesses that helped was phenomenal. What I will commit to is it is dependent on what is in that report. And I will take advice, obviously, from council officers on whether that can be published. If there's stuff in the report that needs to be exempted and taken out, we can do that. But I do need to see the report before we can commit to producing it at full council.
Okay.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, can I just make a comment on that? The debrief is likely to be a multi-partner debriefing document, so we will be in the hands of the other partners as to what we can and can't release. But I don't foresee any issue with us releasing anything that's in the public domain. It's just got to get agreement from other partners, that's all. And I do take your point, Councillor Green, that you're not being critical of the council. I do appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, good. We will move on to item 17, which is the exclusion of the public and press. I move that in accordance with the provisions of Schedule 12A of the Local Government Act of 1972 and paragraph 10.43 of the Council's Access to Information Procedure Rules, the public and press be excluded for the consideration of the remaining business.
Second that.
Good. Well, we will not continue now until we are being confirmed that live streaming is finished. I can't see any members of the public in here. I take it everybody agrees. Nobody said they did.